Testing, 1, 2. Check 1, 2.
Good morning, everyone. I have a quorum of the Planning Committee in the room, so I will ask everyone to come to order. And members of committee, if you could take your seats. If I could welcome everyone to the 74th meeting of the Planning Committee for this term of council. It is May the 13th, and we have a big agenda, so we want to start on time. If you wish to speak to the committee, if you'd fill in a request to speak form, it's a piece of paper that you'll find at the table under the large Ottawa sign. Bring it to the committee assistant to my closest right, and we will get you on the agenda to speak to the committee. If you don't want to speak to the committee but you want to submit some written comments because you can't stay for the entire duration of the meeting, there also is a comment sheet at the door under the Ottawa sign where you can file your written comments with us. Now, this is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as items 2 to 8 on today's agenda. For items listed above, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Municipal Board. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Ontario Municipal Board if Council does not adopt an amendment within 120 days of receipt of an complete application for zoning and 180 days for a complete application for an official plan amendment. Une feuille de commentaires est disponible à l'entrée pour toute personne désirant soumettre des commentaires écrits concernant les modifications. Members of the public who are here today, I'm going to clear up before we go to a consent agenda a little bit of administration with respect to item number 9. Development charges, background studies, and bylaws. So if you're here for that item, it is unlikely that we will get to that item this morning. So if you want to go and have a coffee and check back here at 11 o'clock to see what situation we are in. If we are still hearing delegations on Wellington Street and other applications, I would advise you to come back at 1 o'clock. We will be breaking for an hour for lunch, or that hour tends to get tighter and tighter, but we will reconvene if we take a lunch break at 1 o'clock, so you can come back. And if you're here specifically to talk about the reinstatement of the housing development charge and the development charge for childcare, there will be a motion that will be tabled and voted on with respect to directing staff to undertake the relevant background studies, determine the levels of service, and an appropriate charge to be placed back in the development charges bylaw. And if you want further details on that, Councillor Taylor is here, and he will be around just briefly while we, and you may talk to him about it, and that may give you some comfort that we're going to take care of that, those two particular items, and you may not want to stay till well into the afternoon on that item. So again, for people here, item number 9, it's unlikely we will get to that this morning, so I would suggest right now you go and have a coffee and you come back at 11 to see where we are at. If we are still in the midst of Baseline Road or Wellington Street or Jockvale, then I would suggest you come back at 1 o'clock. So, and again, Councillor Taylor is there if you have specific questions about the reinstatement of housing and childcare development charges and the development of the requisite background studies for those items. And he can meet them in the hallway if you'd like to speak to him and get more information. So members of committee, I have not received any, I've not been advised that any member of committee will not be attending today's meetings or sending their regrets. Are there any declarations of interest? We're all interested? Okay. Confirmation of minutes. Minutes 73, Tuesday, the 22nd of April. All right, they carried? Carried. Okay. We're going to go through a consent agenda and see if we can't... item number 1 is building better and smarter suburbs, vision and principles. I have no one registered to speak to the committee with respect to that item. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to item number 1? Members of the committee, is item number 1 carried? Carried. Okay. Item number 2 we're going to hold and come back to. That is the zoning at 3700 Jockvale Road. We have a number of speakers in agreement, and I don't know whether... okay. Mr. and Mrs. Tato Mirvovic, sorry if I made that mistake. Are you here? Okay. Jay McLean or Zach Manula, are you here?
Traffic must be
Aileen Gossin, you're here. And are you in opposition? Okay. So you're in opposition. Okay, so we're going to hold that item and come back to it. Item number 3 is the zoning at 2940 and 2946 Baseline Road. So we're going to we have people in opposition, so we're going to come back to that. Item number 4 is the zoning at 250 City Center Avenue. I have no speakers on that item, and no one registered to speak. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to 250 City Center Avenue? No? Is that item carried? Carried. Okay, item number 5 is the zoning at 12 Sterling Avenue. We've received a request to defer that for 2 weeks to allow some consultation with, is it Hintonburg? Hintonburg Community Association. We do have the consent of the applicant, and this item would be on the April 27th agenda. And just confirm, May. Just confirming, Mr. Mark, we don't have to re-advertise. We're fine to designate that to a time specific?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. Okay, and so we've got agreement with Mr. Hopner. The Hintonburg Community Association is requesting, and you're fine with it. Oh, you're gonna have a public meeting. Okay, so is it deferred then? Carried. Carried? Carried. Okay. We're going to hold item number 6 and come back to item number 6. And item number 7 is the zoning at 1079, 1123, 1161, and 1213 and 1291 Old Montreal Road and 1190 Regional Road 174. I have one person registered to speak, Mr. Phillips from Taggart Tamarack. I don't have anybody else registered to speak to the committee with respect to those items. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to item number 7? Number 7. No. Is Mr. Phillips, you don't need to speak to the committee, do you? Okay, we'll note that Mr. Phillips is thanking Mr. Boughton and for his work on the file. So can we carry this item? Carried. Item number 8 is the zoning at part of 4650 Spratt Road. I have not received any requests to speak on that item. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to the zoning at part of 4650 Spratt Road? No? Members of committee, is this item carried? Carried. Okay. Now we're going to go back to item number 3. But before we do, 2. Yeah, well. Before we leave the agenda items and do the IPD, I want to... There are a number of people who have sent us registrations, and they didn't note the item that they were objecting to, and they did sign it, so, and they all seem to be coming from Quadrant Engineering Limited, and I don't know if that means anything, but Chuck Clark, is Mr. Clark here? Chuck Clark? Okay. Stephen R. Williams. Stephen R. Williams here? Okay, and the two others, I'm not sure I can tell you who they were. So those two gentlemen, Mr. Williams and Mr. Clark, will call you. Again, as we move through the agenda, I just don't want you to miss your opportunity to object to whatever you're proposing to object to. So let's go back to the zoning, or the item number 2, zoning at 3700 Jockville Road. So, yeah. Okay. I think we just, the 2-minute highlights.
Mr. Chair, I have with me here to my right Louise Sweet Lindsay, Senior Planner in Suburban West, and Birgit Izerd-Hagen, who's the planner responsible for this file, and we have a couple slides to help inform the committee on this matter.
So just to give a very quick overview, the location is what's highlighted in red. It's an 11-house subdivision that's being proposed. It abuts the Stonebridge Golf Course.
Can you speak up a bit? We're going to have to pull that closer.
Is this better?
Yeah, that's better.
So the red outlines the 11-house subdivision proposal. It abuts the Stonebridge Golf Course both to the north and to the east. Opposite the golf course, you'll see that there are single-unit dwellings. And to the west are townhomes that abut a private road. The urban and rural boundary is the southern portion of the proposed 11-house subdivision. You'll see the maintenance facility for the golf course is located in that area. So the purpose of this application is to rezone from parks and open space, subzone A, which allows for golf courses, to residential third density subzone Z, with the exception to recognize the private street as public for the purposes of the zoning bylaw.
Okay.
This is a quick zoning overview map. So you'll see that to the north is the R3Z zone, which is similar to what the proponent is requesting. And also to the east, you'll see that the R3Z for the townhomes is the same. Again, to the south is the rural area, and it's the maintenance facility also zoned as parks and open space.
Okay.
So I have a landscape plan that I put up that can show you the existing trees and as well as those that are being proposed. So in the top left-hand corner, you'll see the ones that are highlighted, both light green and dark green, are the existing that will remain. The light green are those that will be relocated from the area of the subdivision into a
T-box is harder.
already existing buffer, but will strengthen it. And then on the south portion, there will be a privacy fence in addition to a landscape buffer. And then towards the townhomes, there'll be a 2-meter berm in addition to deciduous and coniferous trees.
Okay. So thank you very much. Are there questions from members of committee? Though I would have to take Monarch to task. I think they're making that far tee box very difficult to hit out of, but, you know, that's a golf comment, right? Not a planning. It's not a planning issue.
And Mr. Chair, with all due respect, that's been very difficult to separate all of the issues
Oh, really?
that the residents have with the actual application. And as recently as yesterday, Birgit was going back and forth on what the status of the rating of the golf course would be by moving a tee box. I just wanted to point out, as I don't think that you spoke to the difference in elevation. Maybe you just want to speak to that.
Sure. There's
so that the members of the committee can understand.
Councillor, through the chair, there is a difference in elevation of about 1.7 meters from the tees behind lots 1 through 9, and the difference to lots 10 and 11 is approximately 1.1 meters higher. So the houses are below the golf course.
Thank you very much. Now we have a number of speakers. Zarko and Natasha Tatomirovic. Are you here? Would you like to come down? Morning. Press the big button right in the middle there. And there you go. The red light goes on.
Okay, perfect. So you're asking for my comments now? Yes.
Do you have 5 minutes to relay your position to the committee before we consider the recommendations that are before us?
Okay. This is considered like an open space where you see on the golf course where Monarch is actually planning to build these 11 homes. We call this a forced project because it was never planned for Monarch to ever develop this. This was supposed to be always an open space. That's the way it was always maintained until they changed their decision last year that they were going to impose these new houses. Has some issues with the golf course, also some safety concerns that brought up to the residents. The proposal, what they're trying to build, this open space, which should remain because basically this open space was supposed to be always an open space because they were actually going to keep some other green space elsewhere in Stonebridge. They brought some application where they were given the right to build, and compensation they were saying that they were not going to touch this space and that we were made as open space, and basically now they have changed their mind. They're trying to bring, if you look at the big project, so is this project sustainable? We believe it's not from the Stonebridge. The Stonebridge community in itself is also opposing this rezoning, and we're all opposing this because first it doesn't look as a project that is really sustainable, doesn't fit the community of the Stonebridge community. We would like them to build, but further south. So to respect the distances between the golf course and the houses, which overall when we presented the project, it was 120 meters between the back fence of one property to the other on the golf course. Here basically will be 40 meters. That's the narrowest that you could find in Stonebridge. So we understand that they have some some boundaries because it's there's the limit of the urban development. We tell them to bring an application to extend the urban development and to go more south. So we're basically believe that these houses will are not feasible for as a project. When you look at the project in Kilburnie, they're actually doing a street that goes into a corner, like it's a curve. They're creating a street that doesn't make much sense. A development of 11 houses, this is basically a home run for them. They're leaving, they're done in Stonebridge, they're trying to squeeze another 11 houses, and basically they're renegating what they have verbally confirmed and that they will never do. So this green space should remain a green space. We have, and the community in itself is all not happy with this, just because if you understand that the distance between the houses is 40 meters. So basically people having paid to be on the premiums and paid, and I know the city's not involved into this. There's just, there's also a shed that's at the south of this new project. So we have a lot of concerns with this. We don't believe that the city should approve such a project, when especially we live in Canada where space is, that's what we have. This is not Europe, where basically we're missing space. They're trying to maximize their profit on the limited amount of space that they have already bought. And I believe the city should say, hey, stop, Monarch. We have to protect our residents, that this is not justifiable. This wasn't a project that was planned up front. This is a project that was just invented a year ago. So it's a forced project. They're basically trying to maximize every green space. So you have to understand, and I believe you received a good chunk of comments of my fellow neighbors that are all opposing, that were unable to come today, that sent emails and reconfirming why this should not pass. I believe we have explored this even with Jane Harder, and we believe that this is just not a project that is sustainable. It doesn't follow the philosophy of the City of Ottawa. And basically Monarch can develop these properties, but they have to go further south. Let's respect the integrity of the golf course, the image of the plan of Stonebridge, and not try to be, I believe Monarch is trying to basically maximize their profit, which they're in the business of maximizing their profit, but this is just not a feasible project. And you cannot take some open green space, which was already taken from other parts of Stonebridge in order to keep this green space, and now you're giving it to them to build. I think the city should step up to its fellow residents, saying that this is not a sustainable project, and has you have to look at the big picture of the planning and how this will transpire. This is just not, and you'll see a lot of the comments that we were provided, and I believe that you'll have to take a good look at it. I understand that Monarch might be a very good client to the city, but it's not whatever Monarch does, and they accept to do, they want to do, the city has to basically back their head, say, yes, we'll do whatever you want. So there is some integrity, and I believe that I hold the city to be keep part of the integrity and support to refuse this project.
Okay. So your time's expired, sir, but so I'm going to turn over. We're going to ask a couple questions. Where do you live in relation to this development?
I live the third lot from your, if you're looking at the screen from the left.
On which street?
On Sandgate Ridge.
Sandgate Ridge. So you would be lot 56 or 57?
57, sir.
57. I'm having trouble understanding the concern that you have. How do you believe that the you still have a golf course in between you and the new lots, and I'm assuming the landscaping that is there, the last time I was there, is fairly thick. How are the developments of these lots going to affect your amenity area or your property in particular?
Well, first and foremost, it has to do with, first, the view.
So what is your view now?
The view, I see just a green space, and then I see a shed at the back that basically Monarch got a minor variance.
So there are no trees back along your property line that would...
On my property line, I have no trees. And basically not only this, if you're looking at what Monarch is actually trying to do, and is that this hole, the T hole, the furthest, they basically, because of some safety issues, and they mentioned this in their full 10 planning report, that they're going to have to remove it. So we're not on the golf course anymore. We're on a golf path. It's very different when you're paying $100-something thousand to be on a golf course. I didn't pay to be on a golf path, but the point of all this is basically, and also it's 40 meters. I could see Mrs. Johnson brushing her teeth at 40 meters. So what I'm trying to say...
You have good eyes then, if you can see
you
that.
could see that, but basically, if you're looking at the project, if you look at the overall project of Stonebridge, the distance between the houses, and we presented this to Jane Harder, it's 120 meters between the houses. We had the choice to choose at that time. Would have known that they were going to build there, I would have never bought there. And I believe a lot of people would have never bought. When we spoke with Mr. Rob Pierce from Monarch, he said, Zach, you're totally right. We never intended to build, but we changed our mind. Okay. So I'm saying that this is, when you're looking at the project in itself, it's a forced project. It's not something that was planned initially. You can see it from a curve. In the curve, you're making a street.
Sure. I'm really just trying to I understand all of that. I'm just trying to understand it, and I'm really having a difficult time doing it. The understanding how this, and I know that the $100,000 and what you paid a premium to live on the golf course. I mean, I look at it, tee boxes are part of a golf course, but that's just me. When you're in your backyard and you're not like my backyard, and I look right into the backyard of someone who's right next to me. I don't have 40 meters between me and my neighbor. So I'm trying to understand how this new development actually impinges upon the use of your amenity area. And so that's what I was trying to get at. So I get the rest of your development. I just don't understand that, and I don't know that you're going to be able to convey it to me. But we have other members of the committee who want to ask questions. Councillor Moffat.
Thanks so much. We haven't met before. I represent Rideau Goulburn. It's kind of a unique area because the urban boundary used to be the backyard. So your backyard was the urban boundary. The rural area started in the 5th hole. It's kind of a weird situation where the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th holes happen to be in Rideau Goulburn. So it's fair to assume that you didn't think it was going to be built back there, but at the same time, any urban boundary, village boundary that changes, you can't just, it's not going to be built there now. Things change, and the boundary in this case did change. So for the developer's perspective, that was always a rural area up until 2012. Now it's fully within the urban area. Some of the questions, one of the points you made, I'm just curious, you talked about the distance between homes. I'm just not clear as to how this is any different than the second tee on the East 9.
The second tee on the East 9.
Sorry, the third tee on the East 9. It's a hole that goes out into water, and the green turns up to the left. There's you cross the street. I can't remember the name of the street, but you play the par 5, the par 3, you cross the road, and there's tee boxes right between two homes.
Yeah, but
that's 40 meters as well.
Yeah, that's normally when you're buying on the golf course, you have a couple of exceptions, which is the beginning, but this is basically because they're trying, and when you're buying, the point is when you're buying something, you know what you're buying.
Yeah, I'm just trying to deal with the reality of the situation. You're dealing with an issue yourself and the developer. I'm just talking about comparisons. You said there's no comparison on the golf course.
Yeah, 99%. It's like if you're looking, and we presented the big plan. We did a scale.
It's still no different than the third tee box.
Yeah, but when the tee box, the people that bought on the tee box, what you're saying is when you know that you're buying this, it's different when you're buying something and it's removed from you. So it's very.
I don't know. I guess I don't understand the argument because you bought on the boundary. There was no indication that boundary would never ever move. So it's kind of.
Yeah, but when you look at the project, Mr. Moffat, when you're in a curve, I'm sorry. So when you're looking, who in the world, I would have never imagined that in a curve you could create a street and create a subdivision there. It just doesn't look normal. If you go on Kilburn, and I'd be more than happy to see you, you'll see that basically doesn't look something that's. It was planned, and I could have never foreseen that someone would have built there, ever.
Just on to one of the other points you made, you talked about sustainability, and you thought this is sustainable, but it would be more sustainable to build the homes further south. So to expand the urban boundary even further into the rural area is more sustainable by your definition. Can you just explain that?
Well, I have to give you something in order to oppose this one. My goal is, the real goal is that I don't want them to build there. Not even 80 meters from there, like more 80 meters longer. So I don't think it's sustainable even 80 meters afterwards. Don't get me. I didn't say that this is sustainable even after 80 meters. So don't put me some words in my mouth.
No, you did say you'd rather further south.
I would further to respect, because I have to give an option that they are allowed to build. I cannot say I don't want them to build. So basically I'm saying I'm giving an option that they could move the boundaries of the, and try to build more on the south side. My preference is that they don't build at all. That's the reality.
I just wanted to get clarification. I didn't understand how you could say urban sprawl is more sustainable than this development. So.
No, I believe that both are not sustainable.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, and thank you very much for coming out today. I just want to summarize. To really bring it all together, your main objection is that this application is not consistent with the community plan as you know it.
That is correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, no further questions for Mr. Tadomirovic. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Jay McLean or Zach Manula, are they here?
Well, I'm Zach. I'm Zach Tadomirovic Manula. Jay could not make it today.
Okay.
He just sent me an email that he was caught in the meeting.
Okay, so you're not Mr. Tadomirovic.
I am Tadomirovic, and I have my mother's last name, Manula. So a lot of people call me Mr. Manula. Some people call me Tadomirovic Manula, depending on how they...
Okay, so you're one and the same, so I won't continue to call you.
That is correct.
Aileen Gosson, if she's here? She is here, I know she was. Sorry, Natasha
Natasha is my wife.
is his wife. Yeah. She's not speaking.
Oh,
Okay.
This is Aileen.
Aileen. Sir, you can go back and sit in the audience.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, you have to press the big button. It doesn't matter. There you go.
Technology. So I've written a few notes. I won't digress and be too emotional about all this, but I don't have meters, I don't have measurements, just a plea to the...
Elaine,
Yes.
can you pull it? Yeah, whoa.
Okay. I'm here to appeal to the committee to first delay its decision and allow us the time to ensure that all concerned have received the documentation I received on Saturday. We've only received this, and we're advised of the meeting. I left town Tuesday on business, had no information, no document to look at until Saturday. So I would like for us to delay this, or to give myself and others who have not received the information enough time to assess the impact of the changes. Second thing I would ask is that you take the time to review and consider your recommendations with regards to the rezoning of 3700 Jogvale Road. Taking into consideration the comments below formulated in haste due to the short deadline. As a 25-year resident of a cul-de-sac in the more established part of Barrhaven, choosing to live in Kilburnie is a decision we made with careful consideration and evaluation. Looking to retire and have our grandchildren visit, we inquired about the number of townhouses that were going to be built on the lane. We looked at the two streets that were designed to come into Kilburnie and asked questions about the path that took, the path that went to the maintenance lot. We asked Monarch, what would happen? Would there be a street? Would there be houses? And we were told no. We were given the brochure that showed the golf course. We were told this is the way it's going to be. It is zoned parkland. It will never change. You know, the city never changes its zonings. This is what we were sold when we purchased our lot. Since the zoning sign was posted on the property, we feel we've been bullied in accepting this rezoning. A meeting was held on December 2nd, giving us hope that this would not be a rubber stamping exercise. Unfortunately, all that has happened in the last few months, points to just that. First, the city zoning department not only did not enforce zoning restrictions with regards to the infringement of the installation of a construction trailer on the adjacent lot, increasing local traffic up to an additional 125 to 150 construction vehicles a day. City representatives phoned me, suggested I contact Monarch so they could explain to me that this was their most convenient solution for them. Several emails were exchanged in October, November, whereby the city stated that owners can alter their site at will, but they cannot alter the grade or adversely impact the neighbors. The city was advised that increased traffic was negatively impacting the neighbors by myself and others in the neighborhood, and that Monarch was bringing dump trucks to dump dirt all around that lot, thereby changing the grade of the land. The city's response on October 24th was that the site inspector found no issues upon speaking with Monarch. No response to this day to my email of October 25th inquiring as to what exactly the city inspector actually looked into. It wasn't until the bylaws department was contacted that action was taken. This led us to believe that the city was more open to finding a solution convenient to the builder, Monarch, than actually enforcing its zoning restriction and supporting the local community. Second, we were invited to discuss the rezoning at a December 2nd meeting, which we attended in the hope that we might find an amiable conclusion. There, to the bullying and the pushing, we added a little insult from Monarch's representative, actually the third-party consulting firm. We were told by this gentleman that we should stop arguing because we are privileged people, and we should understand there are a lot of people in Ottawa that don't even have a yard. And that gentleman repeated that 4 times that I noted from the notes of that meeting. Now, we're given now just a few days to deal with this approval of this recommendation with little, if no, advance notice. We need time to understand the impact of those changes. We're not lawyers. I'm not fluent in many of the documents you guys are using, so I'm still trying to catch up. I'm not fluent in all the meters and the width and the height and whatever, but I'm trying to learn. So we'd appreciate being given a bit more time to relook at this recommendation. In the document, there were some unadvertised changes that were occurred since December 2nd. On page 3, paragraph 2, we were assured that the street would remain a private road. Now it is being changed to be recognized as a public street. Does that mean there will be a snowplow on that street, or is it just an appellation? If there is a snowplow, will we down street from Kilburney get all the snow and all the waters and everything from that street? Page 13, paragraph 5, changes to the T. Apparently there's now a safety issue that didn't exist 10 years ago, or over the last 10 years when the golf course has been running. Page 14, paragraph 5, the street is now widened to 9.3 meters to allow for parking. Where's the gentleman from Monarch who could tell you, hey, lots of people in Ottawa don't have parking? I'm being facetious here, but honestly. Page 15, urban boundary will be up for rezoning in 5 years, at which time this can become an avenue for more expansion, where Monarch could take the second lot or the adjacent lot, opening it up for more rezoning and adding more houses there. And we'll be back in this room again. Third and most important is the long-term viability of the golf course, Stonebridge, once a vision of the Nepean city. Page 13, paragraph 3. Contrary to the report sent to us, the applicant has stated many times during the December 2nd meeting, 2013, that it is not in the golf course business, but in the residential building business, and would be selling the golf course. It was openly discussed in the media about 2 years ago. This apparently was also not taken into consideration when the golf range was rezoned for housing, driving away Club Link from negotiations of purchasing the golf course. This comment was not denied by Mr. Pierce from Monarch on December 2nd.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask you to bring your presentation to a close. You're over your time.
So what we want to know is what will happen if Monarch continually diminishes the value of the golf course to potential buyers to where they cannot find a buyer. Will Monarch rezone all 18 holes? And before you chuckle, Monarch has purchased a 36-hole, or Taylor Morrison, the mother company of Monarch, has purchased a 36 golf holes course in the U.S. to turn it into residential units. So it has been done. Again, just asking you to give us the time to review this and take into consideration the long-term vision of the golf course. And with regards to nature, you can have a look at this picture. This is nature by Monarch.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there questions for the delegation? Are there questions for the delegation? No? Okay, you have a question for staff. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your presentation. I only have Mr. Tremblay and Mr. Pierce registered to speak. Go ahead, just a second.
Yeah,
is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak to the committee with respect to this item who hasn't been called other than Mr. Tremblay and Mr. Pierce? No? Okay, Mr. Tremblay and Mr. Pierce, if you'd like to come down. Councillor Hardy, you have a question.
Yeah, further to the presentation by Ms. Goslin, I just wanted your comments on what parts that she was talking about. Can you actually consider as part of the Planning Act and part of your analysis of this application?
So I would look at, Councillor through the chair, I would look at I'm looking at zoning, so I'm looking at compatibility, I'm looking at intensification and infill, whether or not it's a fit, and if it's the infrastructure is there to service the community. So in addition to the infill, the intensification, and if it's serviced, we're really looking for the compatibility and that it follows the policies of the general urban area, which are official plan policies, and we're also in line with the provincial policy statement.
And do you take into account the greater Stonebridge community when you're making those decisions?
Of course.
So to balance the type of zoning and the type of build and that sort of thing?
Madam Chair, Councillor through the chair, yes, of course, looking at making sure that it's similar to what's already in place.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Pierce, over to you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is Rob Pierce with Monarch Corporation, the developer in this instance, and of Stonebridge Community and the golf course. I won't take a lot of time speaking this morning. This is an application that has been underway for the past 18 to 24 months, and we've been through a fair bit of work. This morning I have with me our consulting team, Miguel Tremblay from VOTEN, some of you may recognize. Jerry Korsch from CSW Landscape Architects. Mr. Korsch has been the landscape architect for the entire Stonebridge community since its inception. Has been working there closely since the late 1990s and 2000. And given some of the discourse that we've had over the past number of months that did concern some golf course comments, we brought Mr. Ted Baker, who's sitting on the end. Mr. Baker is the golf course architect who designed the Stonebridge Golf Course. And he is also a golf course architect, principal with Baker Turner Consultants, and he has designed many golf courses throughout Canada, including in Ontario and British Columbia and throughout other areas of the country. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Mr. Tremblay so he can speak to some of the comments that have been raised and give a bit of a background of the development itself.
Thank you, Rob. I will not revisit all of the policy discussion. Sure. My intent is not to revisit the policy discussions raised by staff, but maybe rely on a few additional exhibits and provide a little bit of additional history. Monarch did initiate a public meeting even before we submitted the application. It was coordinated through the councillor's office, but recognizing that there would be some community discomfort, there was value in sharing the initial concept. This is the initial concept which is on the screen now. It did include a public road at the time. with still in 11 lots and approximately 34 meters of separation to the from lot line to the lots along Sandgate Ridge. There was some discomfort, so there was a rethink of the concept to the current plan of subdivision that you see above. This is actually not even the most recent. There has been a further tweak. The community concerns related to separation between houses, opportunities for screening. So the approach from Monarch was to reduce the public street to a private street, reducing almost 8 meters of asphalt and boulevards to enhance that separation to about 45 meters between lot line to lot line at its closest point, and it's about 56 meters between dwellings if you factor in the setbacks. There was also some discomfort related to, there's an existing maintenance path that runs this way, that the road was going to be pushed up immediately abutting the townhouses. The private street affords Monarch a little bit of flexibility. It'll have to be done through a plan of condominium, but it creates a landscaped area where there's going to be that 2-meter high landscape berm and landscaping. And then there's some additional landscaping that are going to be protected through the plan of subdivision here. Initially, the private road was going to be 8.5 meters in width. It was increased to 9.3 in response to community comments related to visitor parking. The 9.3 meters provides a little bit of additional asphalt width, which will allow some parking. Recall, if you will, that these houses they're single-family homes with double garages, so in reality they have 4 parking spaces, which is ample and well in excess of the bylaw, but in response to community comments, there was a desire to expand that asphalt roadway. This is the original proposal. This is one additional exhibit. The top one indicates the relocated landscaping. This is a cross-section, although faint to pick up a little bit here. These are the existing homes. This is the golf course fairway. This is the distance from here to here is about 45 meters, and this distance is 56 meters. What's revealing here is also the significant grade change which was discussed by the municipal planner. These are the transplanted and existing landscape materials which contribute to that buffer. If you look closely, what's really going to be recognizable from these existing homes here to the new home is really the roof line and a portion of the second floor, which I wouldn't consider intrusive, especially given that this is the existing maintenance building that was previously referenced by one of the delegations, which has been noted as unattractive by the community. This bottom cross-section is to cedar down the existing townhouses on a private street as well here. This is the 2-meter landscape berm that's going to be introduced and maintained privately by the condominium corporation, or maybe even a variation of the golf course. So, and these are the existing homes proposed, which in terms of profile, orientation, all of those things are very consistent with the fabric along within the golf course community. And finally, with respect to the notion of sustainability, this is the definition of sustainability: injecting a modest number of units into an area where it's already serviced by municipal roads and services, and clearly has a large amenity space component. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Before I get to questions, I'm going to get to questions. I'll get to you. Mr. Tremblay, the assertion was made that this is against the plan for Stonebridge. Can you kind of give us an idea of what plan that is? Is it a CDP? Is there a Stonebridge secondary plan? And if there is, why is this consistent with it, or not, as the case may be?
To the chair, I think what everyone's referring to is the original master plan for the document. It wasn't a municipal document, it was a private document to guide the plan of subdivision. What happened was Monarch took an inventory of their existing lands and realized that there was a piece of land that was designated general urban that was being used as part of the maintenance facility, but in practical terms wasn't needed for the facility. They looked at numerous options. They have done inventories of other portions of the golf course. This is the only one that really provides an opportunity for a better use of land, which again is the definition for sustainability.
So it wasn't in reference to plans. They weren't planning documents as we would know them. They were private documents used to guide the development of the subdivision. So they weren't CDPs, they didn't have status.
Correct. They're not municipal documents.
Right, okay. Which is, I think, is an important differentiation. Because if they were municipal documents, you would have had to amend them, would you not have?
We would have sought amendments if it was part of a CDP, for instance, or a secondary plan, which this is not.
Which is not. So that
No.
Okay. I just want to be clear about what plans are being referenced, because we are like certainty around here.
We do.
And certainty in conformity to our plans. And we just want to make sure of that. Now, Councillor Blais, you had a question?
Thanks, yes. So if this was supposed to stay as open space, why was it not conveyed to the city as part of your parkland dedication or other forms of conveyance?
It's a good question. The open space designation is a little misleading, and in this case here, the open space designation isn't assigned to municipal parks. It's assigned to a private golf course. We use the open space designation. I've done other golf courses. We use it that way. It does allow for community facilities, but in this case, it specifically permits a golf course and actually a golf course maintenance facility. The open space reflects the previous use of the property, which is private.
Fair enough. Is there room on the north side of the golf course, so against the backyards of the existing residents, either to increase the landscaping, as one gentleman was referencing, he has no rear yard trees, and what would be required in order to do that to accommodate their request?
To that question, when we had the public meeting, I talked to a number of the residents who back onto the golf course there. We're going to have to move a lot of the trees that are existing right now, and we offered that if they wanted some of those trees moved to their rear lot line, we could accommodate that. So that offer was made, and that's open.
And that's for the entire stretch of, say, the 10 or 11 units, whatever the width is?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Tremblay and Mr. Pierce? No? Okay.
There were several, at the meeting that people have spoken about, it was a very well-attended meeting for Barrhaven. There were close to 100 people, and it was packed for those of us that were there. But many of the issues that came up were not really planning related. And so, but one of the ones that has been consistent is the fear of what you're going to do next. And I remember one of the questions was, what other place can you possibly do this on the golf course, aside from whether Monarch sells the golf course in the future to whomever? That's not something that we can take into consideration for planning. But the number of people that came out were from a really good cross-section of the entire community of Stonebridge. They asked that question. So what was your answer? I think there was one location
Sorry, I missed you there.
that you could possibly, but weren't intending to?
Councillor, through the chair, we've looked throughout the community, and has been, this was land which was on a downslope. It was access to the golf course. There aren't very many other, there aren't really any other situations like this throughout the community. This is the application that we have before the committee right now, and we're not intending to bring additional similar applications.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your presentation. Now, that's all the speakers that have registered, and I'll ask again, is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak to the zoning at 3700 Jockville Road? No? Oh, sorry. Sir, if you can pick up a request to speak form, fill it out so we know your details for the public record.
Hello? Oh, hi there. So, my name is Doolittle McMartin. My wife and I live at 539 Sandgate Ridge, lot 52 on those documents you've been looking at. Anyways, I wanted to support Zach and my neighbors and Jay, who's director of the Stonesbridge Community Association, director of communications, who unfortunately couldn't make it today. I wasn't planning to speak, but my wife and I are not the only ones who object strongly to Monarch's application for rezoning as unreasonable intensification, and we believe that it will reduce the quality of life at in the Stonebridge community. Not to, reiterate what others have said too much, but basically this land where Monarch wants to build this 11-lot subdivision, is 018 parkland within the city's official plan, which is provided to the community by the city in exchange for higher densities elsewhere in Stonebridge. In my view, it's completely unreasonable for the city to change the zoning at this point in time from parkland to residential third density. Okay. Monarch's action to improve the destruction of parkland in clear violation of the city's suburban planning doctrine. So I'm asking to respect the current zoning and the current quality of life of Stonebridge and reject this application outright. And furthermore, and this part, this part really annoys me, but as a city is well aware, this is not the first time that Monarch has changed its plan over this parcel of land. Right? At one point in time, the plan was to never develop this on this land. Monarch was, in their own marketing words, this land boasts some of Ottawa's most impressive features and landscapes. A good plan, a great plan for Monarch, as it extracted over $1 million in lot premiums from unsuspecting buyers. But that plan, as we all know, and as you all know, was only an empty promise, because in 2009, Monarch, with the help of the city of Ottawa, right here, Monarch was allowed a new plan to move their maintenance facility to this land in exchange for establishing a landscape buffer. So we all know the scope creep of Monarch, of this developer, and we all know that you're allowing them to do that. So what I'm asking you to do is for the city of Ottawa to finally be accountable to your zoning commitment, be accountable to the Stonebridge community, and keep this land zoned as 018 parkland and deny Monarch's application for rezoning. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. I think Councillor Bloss has a question.
It's actually a question to staff, but that comes as a result of the delegation. I've put aside all the comments about golf because they're not really that relevant, and I've put aside comments about what might have happened in recent discussions, but this gentleman indicates that this land, there's a trade-off here in this land for densities elsewhere in the community. Is there any indication in any records that you have that was the case, that this land was designated as open green space, whatever, because there's densities somewhere else?
My source for that is the Stonebridge Community Association, who I think sent you a letter. They referenced some other documents. I'm not. Yeah, no, I'm not really. I don't really have any official.
That's why I'm asking the city, the planning staff, if they have that in their records.
So, Councillor Bloss, through the chair, I have nothing that shows that. It's called Parks and Open Space. It's an open space that's designated solely for the purpose of a golf course, and the golf course is not considered a natural feature. And as such, the city's in the position that it needs to entertain any application against official plan policies.
Okay, so thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Councillor Moffat?
I just want to be clear, but it's not necessarily a question, so I apologize.
So if there's
it's just a comment.
No, we're Mr. McMartin.
Do later.
Questions for Mr. McMartin? Mr. McMartin, thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak with respect to this item? Okay. So I'm going to close the public hearing portion of this meeting and return the debate to committee and reference for committee's consideration the recommendations that are before you in the report. So, Councillor Moffat, do you want to kick off, and then Councillor Harder?
I just wanted to make just a clarification comment on some of the comments that, at least one of the ones we just heard, that this was parkland. Every golf course in the City of Ottawa is zoned open space. So the parks and the golf course are all zoned the same thing. This land was zoned open space because it was part of the golf course, not because it was parkland. So this comment that the City of Ottawa is going against their plan in taking parkland turning into development is a complete misnomer. That land was zoned strictly for the golf course, and it's being rezoned to permit something else other than the golf course. Has nothing to do with parkland.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to everyone who came out to speak today, and thank you to Birgit on your first major application that you've worked on here at the city. And I appreciate the effort that you put in. I really appreciate the amount of time that you've spent in responding to so many communications that we've had from the community. So thank you for that. One of the things that's been difficult from the start with this application is that initially it was just about the premiums that were paid. And so the people that were most impacted, who live just to the northwest, I guess, it's difficult to point directions, but uphill from this application, had paid a lot of money to live where they live. They paid extra to be there. And it was very hard from the start to take that step back and say that can't be part of what you determine as part of a planning application. So at that time, I got a comment from our city solicitor who said that would be a private matter, and very quickly we talked about that with the community. A lot of the other issues have been about more site plan related issues and traffic. Well, traffic, that's why the private road. And Ms. Gosselin was saying that it's gone, you're now making it a public road, but it's remaining a private road, correct? Yes, thank you. The other issues about traffic were with regard to Kilburnie and the bend, et cetera, and the impact that these 11 proposed units would have. So to that point, I wanted independence from the city, and I wanted independence from Monarch, because I knew that it was very important for the residents. So I hired Tom Carmody. Now, most of us around the table know Tom Carmody, recently retired, probably most well-known of our traffic engineers that worked with the city for many years, knows the area very well. He came out and he did a study which I shared with the community and with yourself as well. And I had hoped that that would put those concerns to rest. He is an expert, and we had that independence. The other thing I wanted to be sure, because a lot of the issues were about the golf course, the type of play, what the rating would be, what would happen if would you have to change it from a par 5 to a par 4? What was the quality of the play? These people bought in the golf course community, one, because it's an extremely beautiful place to live, and also for a very good golf course. So I hired somebody outside. That's one of the reasons why they're moving. And Scott Moffat, Councillor Moffat, was part of that work that we undertook, and he is the golfer and I'm not. So therefore, if you have any questions about that, he would be able to comment on it better than me. But it has been difficult from day one to just deal with the planning issues, the planning perspective of it. I mean, we see applications every day. We have a couple coming up that are very personal to the people that live in those communities, and yet we have to determine and make decisions based on the Planning Act, and that's what we know our planners do. So I have pushed very hard, Birgit, you know I have, to have her kick the tires every way possible according to the Planning Act on this application. And she's come up with this report today. And there has been a lot, as I said, of community consultation. I don't think that the people that live near here are ever going to like it at all, the recommendation you have. But from a planning perspective in the province of Ontario, the recommendation she's made is the right recommendation on planning issues. There are other issues that, through site plan, I think that we can do some more work. But I can't in all good faith, even as the elected person representing the people of Stonebridge, say that as the Vice Chair of Planning, that I can try to talk you into doing something that contravenes the Planning Act. And you know, all of you, how seriously I take that. So I will continue to work on this file with Monarch. I think that, Mr. Karash, your offer about having some of the trees along the property lines of the homeowners that are the existing homeowners, I think that that's something that the homeowners should certainly consider and ask for should they wish that. They may not want that. Some of them prefer to have the view looking out on the angle that they are out over the rural area. So thank you for your attention today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Are there any other speakers on this item? Okay. Members of the committee, is the item carried?
Carried.
Carried. Okay. We're going to go on to item number 3, which is a zoning at 2940 and 2946 Baseline Road. And for those of you who are in the audience who are waiting, who have joined us late and are waiting for item number 9, development charges, background study, and bylaws, we probably will not be getting to that item till 1 o'clock. So if you'd like to come back after lunch, please feel free to do that. And if you're concerned about the reimposition of the housing and the daycare charge in the development charge bylaw, there has been a motion that's been prepared and will be introduced to create a background study and a level of service to determine an appropriate charge that will be submitted to committee for approval. And will result in a background study being prepared and coming back to committee at a later date to be imposed or to be implemented as part of the development charges. So, if you're here for DCs, come back at 1 o'clock. If you'd like to leave comments, you can do that. Okay. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know this is an item that you didn't ask for a presentation on. We do have some slides that provide some context, and very briefly, the property is on Baseline Road, south side, just between the 416 and Green Bank. It's at the confluence of 4 neighborhoods. I forget the names of them now, but all within Councillor Shirelli's ward. The site currently accommodates a couple of buildings, a light industrial type of a use for the eastern portion, and a commercial building accommodating some retail and medical offices for the western portion. It's a fairly significant piece of property. Burgil Homes has acquired the property and had submitted applications. The intent is to rezone to a general mixed use with a view to developing 3 residential buildings, towers on a commercial podium for the eastern portion of the property, and the towers would be going north-south direction, ranging in height from 12, 16, and 14 stories.
16, 10,
and 8 as well, and 10 stories. The existing commercial building is intended to be retained at this point in time and refurbished. Through the rezoning, we've looked at it. We're satisfied that it fully meets the official plan policy directions for lands designated general urban area. We've also structured the zoning in a way which introduces a holding provision and sets out certain requirements that would have to be addressed as we go through the site plan approval process to ensure that this site develops in a way that will become an integrated part of the larger community. So with that, Mr. Chairman, and with the images on the screen, if there's any questions, more than happy to answer. Alternatively, you may want to ask for the delegations.
Is there, are there any questions for Mr. Smith? Councillor Shirelli, are there questions for Mr. Smith?
Well, I should actually just take you through some of the major changes that were made from 3 years ago. Changed the number of units from the initial application, and if you could just confirm how many, right? Yeah. So that was 3 years ago.
I'll let Ms. Jort Conway speak to that, Mr. Chairman. She has been with this application and is a little bit more in the details. Melissa?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Shirelli is correct. There have been a number of revisions since the original concept was submitted in June of 2011. This is the original concept showing the 4 towers that were proposed originally on just the one site, which is 2940 baseline.
Yeah, and back then we had a very well-attended first community meeting on this. We had several, and it was determined that the applicant also owned the adjacent site, and the community then asked for the withdrawal of the application and the submission of a new one covering both sites. And maybe you could outline what the response was. The response covering both sites.
Yes, so, Mr. Chairman, the application was submitted to deal with the entire property. There were some refinements made to the development proposal as well, and I know a lot of this emanated from discussions that were held through you, Councillor Shirelli, with your community to modify the program to what is before us today. A couple of key elements that were associated with that, as we understand, that's now reflected in the proposal, is the introduction of opportunities for a grocery store to be accommodated within the podium of the project, reducing the number of units, reducing the number of buildings for the eastern portion, and then also looking at the possibility of a small 8-story building sort of in the back portion of the lot that's accommodates the commercial building. The remainder of the site was intended to remain with maybe the potential for a restaurant pad located along the baseline frontage, but we haven't really seen the plans for that. So there have been some evolution in terms of a proposal, a scaling down, a reduction in the number of units, a reduction in the number of buildings, and also a reduction in the height of the buildings that were initially proposed.
And an increase in the number of parking spots. If you could also indicate, the community was really wanted the commercial designation to remain on the property, and that was not part of the original proposal. The applicant agreed to do that to facilitate a grocery store. Could you comment on how the property can handle the grocery store?
Yeah, the property being located on an arterial road baseline definitely has the capability of accommodating commercial activity in addition to the residential activity. In fact, the property is very well positioned to become a key focal area for the surrounding community with services that support both the new residents that will be moving in here plus the surrounding residential community. The medical facility does that currently, as do the existing retail uses in the existing commercial building, and the introduction of a grocery store can well be accommodated. The amount of parking that is being provided through the initial program for development would support that commercial activity along with the residential parking, which would be provided below grade for the residential. So we're quite comfortable with this project, and in fact the recommendation is for a general mixed-use zone which would accommodate the commercial offerings that Brazil has brought to the table to become part of this project.
Okay, and over the 3 years, the steering committee comprised of representatives from the 4 community associations requested that we make some provision for a coffee shop or pub or that kind of thing. If you could just go through where those possibilities will remain in the final version of this plan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So through the details of the zoning, and again, not to get into the details because it is fairly involved what's set out in the report before you, but through the rezoning, that's an area that's referred to as Area C, and we've made provision to allow for a pad, restaurant, coffee shop type use to be located for the portion of the site that now accommodates the commercial building, probably in the vicinity of Sandcastle and Baseline Road. So the ability is there for that type of a use to be introduced onto the property, and that could occur without going through the formal process other than a site plan application to allow that to happen. So that's provided for and accommodated.
All right. Now, originally there was a proposal only on the one property for an all residential use.
and potential that on the other property there would be more residential use. I'm just wondering if you could also comment on how bringing mixed use in will have a positive traffic impact on the intersection of Baseline and Greenbank.
I think a mixed use is a much more sustainable development program at the end of the day because it introduces uses that will in fact service the community, both those that are living there and those that are living in the project and those that are living in the community. It better facilitates the ability for people to travel to the site by means other than vehicle. It also allows for some breakup in terms of when the traffic activity and the volumes will occur. There will be some modifications that will be required to facilitate the turn movement. The traffic study that was undertaken has shown that those needs can be accommodated, and we would be dealing with those in detail through the site plan process.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any more questions for... Oh, yes, Councillor Tierney, sorry.
Yeah, I'll be brief, Mr. Chair, thank you. I've actually been following this one for a few years, and before I got on to Planning Committee, and I'm sure that Councillor Shirley tested your patience back and forth. There's some pretty significant changes in here, so I think it's a pretty good model. And I know we can't give thanks to everybody all day or we'll be here till Christmas, but I did want to thank staff on this one, and it's something I'd like to speak to you more about for developments in my area, because I see this as a good model for communities in general. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, we have a number of speakers. Cynthia Sutcliffe, if she'd like to come down. So press the big button on in the middle of the thing and pull the mic close to you.
There we are. Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee. My name is Cynthia Sutcliffe. I've lived on Cowichan Way for 20 years and 3 days. My home backs directly onto Baseline Road adjacent to this property. It's not on there, but it is there. On a personal basis, I am adversely affected. My sunlight will be blocked by these towers through the winter months. I dispute Rigel's study. There will be noise from the pub, proposed pub, and the rooftop areas, and my views will be blocked. This huge development will negatively impact on my quality of life and most likely the value of my property. However, I also have serious concerns on how this will negatively affect the surrounding neighborhoods. The excess height and density are my main objection. 10 years ago, this property was owned for 7 stories, and then somehow it evolved to 12. The proposal now exceeds this with 2 of the 4 towers, 13 and 16, plus height for the commercial development below. If 8 to 10 stories had been suggested in accordance with zoning, I would have said welcome to the neighborhood. The proposal emphasizes its convenience to services, such as existing stores, banks, and other services. College Square and Baseline Station are 3.4 kilometers away, a 43-minute walk. Hardly convenient, especially during the long winter months. Only the Sandcastle Drive traffic has been addressed. The Community Association's extensive traffic study has been dismissed, and Councillor Shirley has said that there still has to be a traffic study and traffic mitigation planning done. Baseline and Greenbank is already a failed intersection. In Qualicum, we already experience commuters racing through the neighborhood to avoid the Queensway and the Baseline intersection. Our neighborhood has virtually no street lights or sidewalks. Who will take responsibility when there is an accident involving someone being injured? A number of years ago, I lived on Qualicum Street. Numerous times we requested a stop sign at Qualicum and Beaumaris, and we were ignored until a school bus was broadsided at this intersection. The builders suggest this development will enhance the adjoining neighborhoods, but they have never outlined exactly what these enhancements are. Something that has not been mentioned anywhere is the environmental impact on Graham Creek, which is within 100 meters of this proposed development. 2940 Baseline Road was a heavy-duty construction equipment site owned by Crane Construction for many years. As far as I know, no soil tests have been carried out to ascertain whether oil and other contaminants exist and may leach into Graham Creek when this site is disturbed. This creek, which wends its way through a number of neighborhoods, including Qualicum and Graham Park, before emptying into the Ottawa River near Andrew Hayden Park, is home to black-crowned night herons, green herons, 2 were spotted yesterday, wood ducks, mallards, beavers, and other wildlife. Thorough studies should be carried out to address both of these concerns, traffic and the environmental impact on Graham Creek, before this committee gives its approval and sends it to City Council for final approval. The developer insists that the extreme height and density of this development is necessary so this project is financially feasible due to the high cost of the land and the high cost of developing such land. At the same time, condominium sales in Ottawa are down 9.7% for the first 4 months of this year. And the Ottawa Citizen on May 7th, with regard to the Wellington West development, Mayor Watson was quoted as saying, "It is someone else's fault if he, the developer, is it someone else's fault if he, the developer, overpaid? It's a buyer beware situation. Does this not apply to the baseline development? Should existing citizens be responsible for a poor business plan?" The local community associations have thrown in the towel, having had to fight too many battles. They successfully fought against the Qualicum Business Park, the townhouses backing onto Baseline Road in Leslie Park, the condo development at Baseline and Morrison, and the threat of removing the green space next to the Queensway Carleton Hospital. I don't blame them for being tired and skeptical. One community association president insists this still sticks in the back of my throat. But unfortunately, the process is too biased in favor of the development. I urge this committee to send this flawed project back to the drawing board before every other developer succeeds in, again, breaking the zoning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions for Ms. Sutcliffe? No? Thank you very much for your presentation. Can you just clarify, Mr. Smith, for me, the issue around the creek and the Conservation Authority? Like, they've been circulated with this, obviously.
They did not provide any comments identifying any issues. They would also be circulated again once we deal with the site plan application. I don't believe that it fits within the area that they would have direct jurisdiction over, but being in proximity, we would definitely be circulating the site plan. But up to this point, they haven't identified any concerns.
Okay, thank you. Peter Lowe, is Mr. Lowe here?
I will submit my comments by question.
Okay, that's fine. If you will, we'll note that you are here and that you are going to submit written comments for the public record. Scott Pegram. Mr. Pegram, if you're here.
Mr. Chair and councillors, we've been through a 2-year process with this particular developer, which I'd like to say has gone much smoother than other developments within the neighborhood. We came up as part of the community consultation with a number of issues, including revectoring the kind of development from just 2940 to 2940 and 2946 Baseline Road, which the developer complied with and gave us an overall site plan. So I'd like to thank them for doing that. We also asked them to include some specific community amenities, including this kind of grocery store concept, coffee shops, etc. And they complied with those requests, and I'd like to thank them again. I'd like to note that the height of the buildings does have some impact on my particular community, which is the Qualicum Graham Park Community Association, and I realize that within the confines of the City of Ottawa Development Plan that this is acceptable to the city, but at the same point it does have particular shading impacts, especially in the morning within the community. We raised this, and this is being indicated as being acceptable by the City Planning Committee. The fourth issue that we raised was one of traffic concerns, specifically the traffic backup going eastbound in the morning on Baseline Road, which results through cut-through traffic into our neighborhood. And as part of this particular plan, I'd like the Planning Committee to put in left turn restrictions off of Baseline onto Sioux Crescent between 7:30 in the morning and 9 a.m. To prevent cut-through traffic when school buses are being loaded. Okay. That's it.
Okay, are there questions for Mr. Pegram? Go ahead, Councillor Shirley.
All right, since we're trying to use this also to get certain issues on the record, I just wanted to point out that we can do the turn restriction at site plan phase. So if we can just indicate that you're commenting on the site plan now as well, and we'll do it at that time.
My only concern at site plan is often these traffic restrictions don't actually get executed on at site plan.
Okay, thank you very much. No further questions? Thank you, Mr. Pegram, for your presentation. Jason Tysick. Mr. Tysick here, if you'd like to come down.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and councillors. I'm Jay Tizik. I'm President of the Valley Stream Community Association, and that is the neighborhood that this development falls into. I'd just like to reiterate what Scott said. This has been a long process. We've spent 3 years working with the councillor, with the developers, and I thank them both for that. They've made a lot of concessions. Everything that our community has pointed out that we wanted for this development, the developer has come back with a positive response for us. So we've had 3 votes now and 3 AGMs that this issue was specifically brought up in, and we support this development. And I'd just like to go on record to say that. I would also add that for the traffic issues regarding the left turn from Baseline onto Greenbank, I think much of that could be alleviated by lengthening the amount of time that left turn light is lit. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Tysick? No? Thank you very much for your presentation. Rachel Tweedy.
Morning, Mr. Chair and councillors. I'm Rachel Tweedy, President of the Leslie Park Community Association. Our association has been actively involved with this development since August of 2011. Members of our executive have attended every meeting and were an active part of the steering committee and also the zoning subcommittee. We've written numerous letters to each of the planners who've been involved. We've followed every policy and procedure in the process. And our executive has worked hard to stay abreast of changes in the project so we can keep our residents in the neighborhood up to speed on what's going on. Our primary concerns, and as Jay and Scott have also said, were addressed by Brazil, were to keep the general mixed-use and business park industrial zoning to allow for stores and amenities. So we really see 2940 and 2946 as being the only opportunity for our community to have a full-service produce store within walking distance. The second issue was that we wanted to make sure that the development of both properties was planned at the same time, so that we have members of our community who basically have committed hundreds of hours to the consultation process only have to go through it once. And again, as Jay and Scott have said, for the most part, our experience working with this process and with Brazil has been positive. We as a community feel that our issues have been heard and addressed by the revised concepts that were presented to our community in 2012. So essentially, we just want to go on record as Leslie Park Community Association. We want to ensure that any future plans consider the hard work of many, honor the public consultation process that has already taken place, and doesn't undermine 3 years of collaboration between the community, the steering committee, and Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there questions for the delegation? as she disappears. Are there any questions? No. Thank you, Ms. Tweedy, for your presentation. We appreciate you coming. Okay. That's the... Okay, just let me look to my list here. Oh, I do have a couple more. Sorry. Michael Bolin? You're going to submit written comments? Okay, I'll note for the record that you are the counsel for the Carlton Condominium Corporation 237, and you'll be submitting, and you represent the firm of Nelligan Power, and you'll be submitting written comments.
Just on that, though, Mr. Chair, if you could also direct them to speak to Mr. Moser or staff, because some of their issues may be able to be settled that way.
Okay, well, I suggest that after this item's concluded, you go up and talk to them and make sure that that would be, put those two parties together. And our last speaker is Miguel Tremblay. Mr. Tremblay, are you here? You're on behalf of Brazil. And I'm just going to make sure that before I go to Mr. Tremblay, is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak to the zoning at 2940 and 2946 Baseline Road?
Maybe one of the...
And Peter Lowe. Sorry, did I not call Peter Lowe? Peter Lowe, are you here? Oh, that's right. Yes, you said you didn't want to speak. You want to submit written comments. Sorry, just don't want to close the public hearing portion and miss anybody. So, okay, Mr. Tremblay, you're up.
Thank you for your time. I feel obligated to say that the reason it took 3 years is not because of the planning consultant, but rather because Brazil made significant concessions to the community. The most meaningful, though, was withdrawing... At least you didn't work me.
Is that a plug for your firm, Mr.
It is a plug.
Mr. Tremblay?
The most meaningful change, though, was withdrawing the application. During the course of the consultation for the four-story concept, Brazil acquired the property to the south, initially with no intention to redevelop, because it was a very good retail tenant. There was the Bouclair within the building. It's a very good building, but at the insistence of the council and the community, the application was withdrawn, repackaged to include both properties, and recirculated, which did contribute to some delays, but it also contributed to some insight. The very first public meeting, as one of the delegations pointed out, this is far removed from existing retail and existing food stores. Brazil heard that message loud and clear and chose to integrate a food store in the base tower of the first building. This is the phase 1 building, so the food store or whatever tenant they're able to secure, and they are shopping around. It's going to be a 20,000 square foot tenant, so it's ideal for a range of food store options, is going to be actually part of the phase 1 development. The councillor and staff prepared an inventory of all those changes, so I'm not going to revisit, only to highlight the ones that weren't mentioned, in that the 4-building complex didn't afford the project the same level of separation between towers, which is now in the 22 to 24 meter range. It also created some enhanced setbacks to the rear. It's 19 meters to the rear property line and 25 meters to the closest dwelling, understanding that there's also a very significant grade change. This tower is actually 90 meters to the dwelling on the north side of Baseline Road, which is a significant separation, and there was a shadow analysis to account for impacts, and the shadowing does not encroach into their amenity space. Although the area is very well serviced by parks, the second floor here is going to be incorporated into terracing and second floor amenity areas for the buildings, and there's also pools and amenity spaces in each of the 3 buildings, and this one I don't think will benefit from that. With respect to the densities projected, given that resisting the temptation of simply doing residential on the bottom portion, the FSI for the entire site is 3.0, which is actually quite modest when you consider a property so large. Part of that is because Brazil is retaining the existing commercial, which also has second floor medical office, which has value from a community perspective. There's an intent to keep that there as a community amenity. What that does from a traffic perspective is it creates off-peak times for different uses. So rather than simply injecting residential trips into the network or simply injecting commercial, it provides that balance. People are going to be leaving and departing the site at different times. Even though the project well exceeds the bylaw in terms of parking, the commercial parking will be at grade, obviously, and it's going to be shared between the food store and the existing building. All of the residential parking is below grade, with the exception of the visitor parking, which is along this main spine for the property. We are submitting a site plan. We're about 2 weeks away. That site plan includes a community traffic study, which is a larger traffic analysis, which will include a broader range of intersections. It's not simply going to look at Sandcastle. It's going to look at the larger network. We've already submitted several addendums to that already, so I think staff has a good sense of where those pressures are. And there will also be a range of other studies, including geotechnical, environmental site assessment. This was, and it should be reminded that there will likely be a brownfield application to this as well, because this was a heavy industrial site, and this is a municipal benefit to clean up this site through that process. So there will be a geotechnical report, there will be an environmental report, there will be a stormwater report, which will increase any downstream impacts to the creek. It will likely require some quality control on the site. So, in conclusion, echoing your planner's comments, it's well in keeping with the municipal policy framework. It's actually good land use planning. It provides a good range of uses. It eliminates an intrusive use into the community, and it does so by managing impacts. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Tremblay? Councillor Shirelli, are you good? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Tremblay, for your presentation. And with that, that concludes the delegations for this item. I'm going to close the public hearing portion of the meeting and turn the recommendations back to committee and draw committee's attention to the recommendations that are on the planning report that are in front of you. So, Councillor Shirelli, do you want to lead us off?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, some people, first of all, I want to thank the Qualicum Graham Park, Wesley Park, Valley Stream, and Redwoods communities for the incredible amount of work that they've put into this over the past 3 years. They have all become very professional at this because we've had a number of developments in the area over the past 6 or 7 years. And recently they've been very successful by maintaining a reasonable approach, been able to be very successful in helping to knock down the application at Great Wise, which initially started in above 20-story buildings down to 4 stories. That was a very significant change. And then in this case, we had an initial situation where you had 4 towers and you had a property right next door the same size that could conceivably be using the initial application as a precedent for its next application, and people were very concerned that whatever would happen on the site at 2940 baseline would also be done in the context of what would happen at the adjacent property. So, despite the long odds, the community did move forward and request that the applicant withdraw the application and submit a whole new one and recirculate. And as you know, that was done, and as you also know, that is rarely done. There are some who would like to just take the position, or have us take the position, that everything should be held to the zoning that existed at the time of the application. But as you know, we have rezoning hearings for only one purpose, and that's to review the existing zoning and see if another one makes equal or better sense. And that's why we're here. That's the only reason we're here at zoning meetings. It would be easy to say, you know, the applicant should be held to exactly what was envisioned in the first zoning, and other considerations shouldn't be examined. It would be easy to say that, but we know that that wouldn't pass at this committee because there are other objectives that have come into play at council over the past several years. The new official plan is a very changey document. it asks the entire city to intensify. It asks the entire city to take into account other objectives than would have been taken into account in previous OPs. Stronger emphasis on mobility, stronger emphasis on connectivity, and sustainability. And with those are cost implications as well, and our official plan tries to help control those costs for taxpayers. So when these groups sat down with the developer, and over 3 years they achieved significant gains on every area that they sought gains. So the new project has over 80 fewer units. That's a significant number. It has over 150 additional parking spaces. And it has this over a space that's twice the size. In addition to that, the community had only one chance left for a food store, a produce store, a grocery store, and that was on this property. And the initial application was to get rid of the commercial designation and go all residential, and the community would have lost its opportunity for a grocery store. The applicant, although it doesn't normally build grocery stores, decided to accommodate the request within the application, and has also moved to accommodate the need for a community meeting place like a coffee shop. So I think my job is not to get exactly what people may think they want when they first see a plan. It's to get the best deal we can get for the residents. And I think all of the residents who participated actively in this process over 3 years have every right to be proud that we've achieved significant gains on every area that they sought gains. So thank you very much to the community, and thank you to the applicant for listening to the community.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Shirley, is there anyone else on this item? Okay. Is on the item then, is it carried? Councillor, members of the committee, is the item carried? Carried. Okay. Excellent. Okay. We're going to go on to item number 6, official plan and zoning 1445, 1451 Wellington Street. As we get set up for that one, if there are people in the audience who are here for development charges, I told you to come back at 11 and see where we're at. I thought we'd be well into item number 6, but we're not. So come back at 1 o'clock. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is an application for 1445, 1451 Wellington Street. This is an application that staff is not recommending refusal. It's a rezoning and official plan amendment application for this particular property, and the primary focus of the applications is to allow for a 12-story development, whereas the official plan limits heights to 9 stories and the zoning limits heights to 6 stories with the ability to go up to 9 stories in the context of the policy framework. I have with me Don Herwire, Program Manager for the inner area for the City and Development Review, and also Hugh Wing. We do have a presentation, and I'll ask Hugh to quickly run through that presentation just to give the overall context for the committee. We'd be happy to answer any questions after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The development applications received are on 1445 and 1451 Wellington Street West. Apologies. The development applications received are in OPA, so it's an amendment to the Wellington Street West secondary plan from 6 to 12 stories on 1445 Wellington and from 9 to 12 stories on 1451. In terms of the zoning bylaw amendment, the proponent is requesting an increased height from 20 meters to 44.5 meters, as well as relief to a number of other performance standards. In terms of location context, the site is located on the north side of Wellington Street West. It's just on the eastern corner of Island Park Drive. It's approximately 900 meters from the Westboro Transit Station. The site itself, it's an assembly of 2 lots. It's approximately 0.18 hectares. Island Park Drive is a designated scenic driveway. To the west of Island Park Drive is Richmond Road, which is the main street of the Westboro community. The site has approximately 54 meters of street frontage along Wellington Street West. Currently, there is a former Pro-Shine automotive garage on 1451 Wellington on the left-hand side. On 1445 Wellington, there's an existing restaurant known as Bella's. This is just another view of the site at the corner of Island Park Drive and Wellington Street West. And before I show other photos of the surrounding area, I just want to provide some details of the proposal itself. It is a 12-story plus mezzanine building, so that would be defined as a high-rise building. There will be up to 114 units and 147 parking spaces in 4 levels of underground parking. The rendering shown is not per the latest plans, but does demonstrate the architectural style, the overall built form, and the building materials to be used. This is the latest elevation drawing along, and it's shown along Wellington Street West. The next slide is the draft site plan. So there is a site plan application received, and it's currently on hold pending decision of these amendment applications. In terms of the setbacks, they are near the lot lines with 1 meter provided along the front yard, and we're near the lot lines on the remaining 3 sides. So it's generally almost 100% lot coverage. In terms of the surrounding area, you can see Bella's restaurant in the foreground. This is looking east down Wellington Street West. There have been recent condo developments in the area. These 2 buildings shown are 6-story mixed-use buildings. This is looking in the opposite direction towards Richmond Road. There are other condo developments in the area. You can see the subject site on the right-hand side. Across the street, there is a gas station. Looking further east, at the corners of Richmond Road and Island Park Drive, existing uses are car dealerships. This is looking north down Island Park Drive. This is at the corner of Wellington Street West and Island Park Drive. These are city-owned lands that abut the site to the west. Currently, there is a pathway that connects the intersection to Rockhurst Road. In the Wellington Street West secondary plan, it does identify this location for a future park space. This is Garrison Street. It's the residential street that's behind the subject property. And this is a view of the houses along Garrison Street from Wellington Street. And as you can see, there is a grade difference from Wellington Street down to Garrison. The next few slides are perspectives of the proposal. This is along Wellington Street looking north. The next is it's east of the site. It's probably around where the Metro grocery store is, and it's looking looking west. And the next slide is looking from Garrison Street to the proposed building in the southern direction. In the official plan, the site is designated traditional Main Street. The proposal was reviewed against the official plan policies with particular attention to Section 2.5, Building Livable Communities, and Section 4.11, Urban Design and Compatibility. In the Wellington Street West secondary plan, it is also designated traditional Main Street and it is within the West Wellington policy area. You can see on the slide it's identified by the red star. It's at the western edge of the corridor. Generally, a mid-rise built form is proposed in a corridor, generally up to 6 stories. There are a select number of sites that are identified for higher stories, 1451 Wellington Street West being one of those sites. It's identified with the potential to be rezoned to 9 stories in the addition of Section 37 benefits, which is the redesign of the city-owned lands abutting the site into a park space. The existing zoning is traditional Main Street subzone 11, so this zoning is specific and was adopted at the same time as the Wellington Street West secondary plan. The maximum permitted height is 20 meters. You'll see on either side of the traditional Main Street zoning, it abuts the residential first density zone, so this is the lowest density for a residential area. To the west of the site on Richmond Road is also a traditional Main Street zoning with a height limit of 15 meters. In terms of the zoning request, as mentioned before, it is to increase the performance standards of building height from 20 meters to 44.5 meters, as well as asking relief on a number of setbacks, creating a taller and wider building on the site. It is the Planning Department's position to recommend refusal of the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment application for the following reasons. The first being it does not satisfactorily comply with the compatibility and design objective policies of the official plan. It does not meet the human scale urban village vision of the Wellington Street West CDP and secondary plan. And lastly, the proposed height, built form, and scale, it's not supportable by staff at this location. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Maybe you can help me. I've read the documentation, but what rationale was there for modification to the CDP and secondary plan?
Mr. Chairman, the primary basis for the rationale, as we understood it, is that because of the contamination on this site, that it was not feasible to develop the site in accordance with the directions that were set out in the CDP and the secondary plan, which provided the ability to go up to 9 stories, and that additional development opportunity would be required to realize having this property actually be developed.
So, Mr. Smith, when did site conditions become a planning rationale for increased density and height?
Mr. Chairman, from our perspective, that is not a rationale. We do have a program available, as this committee knows, that assists and facilitates the cleanup of brownfield sites for development. It's the planning policy direction that sets the framework, which is the primary sort of vision or lens that we have to look through to determine appropriateness from a planning point of view. Site contamination is not factored in as one of those considerations.
You're a professional planner, and you have in your profession, are site conditions routinely used as planning rationale or planning reasons for granting extra density and height?
It's not uncommon to see that type of a request come through, and what is common is we don't accept that as a basis.
It's a bit of a backward answer, Mr. Smith, but the fact, what you're telling me is that it's not a planning reason to grant extra height.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
So I want to go to that, Mr. Mark. If we're to and I recognize, I think, and I hope the other members of committee do, that this has wider implications than just this individual site. So if council accepts that site conditions are a valid reason for increased height and density, and that an applicant puts forward those conditions in another location, which we would then say, no, that's not a really good planning reason. Can this decision, should we overturn it be used against us in a hearing at the Ontario Municipal Board?
The short answer to that is yes, Mr. Chair.
Right. So it can be, it's not a precedent, but it's evidence that could be used to demonstrate that the city is applying different criteria to applications. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, as has been mentioned many times at this committee, every case is decided on its own merits. However, one can count on an applicant using past decisions of the council that assisted and using it against future decisions of the council that go the other way.
Okay, so I just want to be clear so that if you know, there's an application in, let's say, Councillor Manette's ward where it's bad soils, and we say, well, yeah, maybe bad soils, but that's not a rationale for giving you 10 more stories, we can be sure that that's, if challenged at the board, that site condition will be, they will use the evidence in this case against us.
That is true, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mark. Does anyone else have any other questions? Because I can. Councillor Hobbs.
Thanks, Chair Hume. I'm a bit confused about a discussion now about evidence of cleanup being the reason for this development coming in at 12. I don't believe the applicant has ever stated that. I mean, it'll be up to them to say that, but the other day when I came to FEDCO to ask for that was just the start of a wedge in terms of all the brownfield sites that exist within the CDP to make sure they are developable, since this one was looked at 5 times. There are others in the neighborhood that are worse. So the whole brownfield thing came up because that was the suggestion made by Chair Hume in the media that that would be a good way of getting people to conform to the CDP. It had nothing to do with what the applicant had ever said to me or asked for, and I'm just wondering, did they ask that to you, that planning staff?
Mr. Chairman, I guess the best that I can indicate is that the initial discussions that were had before application was submitted was that the intention was to move forward with a 9-story project. When the application came in, it came in as a 12-story project, and the only connection there is some of the issues in terms of the additional cost. So I'll turn over to Ms. Wing whether or not she has anything further.
Yeah, because I'd like to know if those additional costs also have to do with the extensive consultation done in the neighborhood and the differences made in the design.
In terms of the application submission, a planning rationale was provided. As part of the rationale, the issue of the contamination was included in the report. So not the whole rationale, but part of the rationale.
Was considered in which report? I'm sorry?
The planning rationale document that was submitted with the OPA and the zoning bylaw amendment applications. So it's a document submitted by the applicant.
As a reason for asking for the extra height, it was indicated?
It was included in the planning rationale.
In what regard, I'm asking, sorry, I just want to clarify this because I think we're putting a lot of discussion on the brownfield when that sort of was closed in terms of us changing our policy, but and we well understand, I think, that brownfields are never considered a rationale for extra height. So I just want to know how much of that was asked for or discussed in terms of the 12 stories, because that's what seems to be what's being bandied about here now.
I would say in part of the planning rationale, the issue of contamination came up. In terms of saying specifically that's the reason for the additional 3 stories, I can't speak to that, but in terms of the planning rationale as a document, that's applied to the proposal itself.
Thank you.
Mr. Mark, or Mr. Smith, I guess, the West Wellington CDP creates a height profile within the zoning and the CDP, does it?
That's correct. It establishes for the West Wellington area generally 6 stories. It allows for 9 stories at certain locations. A portion of this property where Joe's Auto Radio was located is identified as a site that can go to 9 stories through a rezoning. The implementing zoning that was put in place following the approval of the CDP and the secondary plan establishes a 6-story height limit across the property. So there is flexibility and ability within the policy framework to go up to 9 stories, but not beyond 9 stories.
Right. So if we were to go to 9 stories and an application was made down the street, or to go to 12, and an application was made down the street to go from 6 stories, which is the height plane, to 9 stories as an example, you would come to us and your response would be, we're relying on the height plane that's in the CDP.
Again, for that, they would also have to apply for an amendment to the secondary plan, and whenever an amendment is requested to a secondary plan, it's a much more rigorous planning assessment that is undertaken to determine whether in fact it's appropriate. In West Wellington, there was attention given to the scale, and there were opportunities identified for 9-story elements. I think that would be a very difficult proposition to move forward.
I guess my concern, Mr. Mark, is that if we overturn staff recommendation here and grant this extra height, that when we go to rely on the height plane as a defense in other applications that are sure to come, if we're prepared to entertain that the decision in this case would be used against us as evidence at the Ontario Municipal Board in trying to maintain the height profile when we don't have community support, or we don't have sort of the framework that this application seems to present.
And Mr. Chair, as I responded in the last line of questions, that is correct. The board will take into consideration where council itself has seen flexibility, and the board will import that to itself. But if the council has the flexibility, then the board does, and it will be a factor in the board's decision.
Now, and have you seen other case law where that has that sort of inconsistent application? I'm going to not rely on the height planes in this case, but I want to apply it in others where the board has taken upon itself the decision and said that the city could no longer rely on the provisions of the CDP or the height planes in that case?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And those case laws, are they in urban areas?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Right. So, and maybe it would be important, because this is an important principle that we're going to face in other applications. If you could provide those to members of committee, because I think they were in the Toronto area, were they not?
Mr. Chair, my mind has been on development charges more than or a fair bit recently. I will refresh my memory on those cases, and they will be forwarded to members of committee.
Okay, that's good. Councillor Hobbs?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So just in regards to that and the concern about precedence that is being discussed here, as part of the CDP, we rezoned, after doing the CDP, we rezoned the Bethany Hope House site for 13 stories. I don't see that has created a big precedent down the street. That is just going into development now. Can you please comment on that in terms of the 13 stories that was approved after this CDP?
Mr. Chair, I'll lead off, and then Mr. Smith may wish to follow. One of the differences in that case is the CDP was not established yet. This was being brought forward and on appeal to the board at the process of establishing the policies. And so, if one were to apply what is called, or what has become to be called, sort of the certainty approach, that would come into being after a decision was made, such as the approval of the Bethany site.
And that approval was made to go against what the whole intent of the CDP was, in order to retain a heritage aspect on that site. And to my mind, in the CDP, when it was crafted, there were sections of that CDP that allowed for exceptions and allowed for consideration of things that might happen in an urban area like this, brownfields, heritage, and that was written in there. That's why we went and did the Salvation Army site and rezoned it differently after, for all intents and purposes, all the consultation was done with the neighborhood on what would happen along this strip. So I just, I'm a bit confused at why we can have different heights in different places along the strip, and yet, and at the other end that's not included in the CDP, we approved 24 and 30 stories, and at this end, an important gateway site to our business community, we've decided to draw such a firm line in the sand that it wasn't even considered. So I'm not quite sure how fair we are, and that's a concern of mine.
Mr. Chairman, maybe just to add on Mr. Mark, for the Salvation Army site, that was part of a minutes of settlement process. They had filed appeals to the changes that were being introduced in the West Wellington. And I think the other thing that is important to remember is that on the Salvation Army site, it's a very large site. And the 13-story element that was ultimately deemed to be acceptable was located behind the Bethany Hope building, internal to the site, so the relationship to the surroundings was very different than what we see here. So I think that's, again, I think as Mr. Mark has advised this committee, as we always do, each application is looked at on its own merits. This was in the context of a minutes of settlement discussion where a resolution was arrived at for the Salvation Army property, but the site context is also very, very different.
So you're saying that precedent really isn't an aspect to this, because if each site is considered on its own, as the Salvation Army site was, then so should this one, I would think from that comment.
I think Mr. Mark provided his advice to questions from the chair with respect to how things can be used by others. What I can say is that from a planning perspective, we don't base our decisions and recommendations on precedent, but having said that, we all know that previous decisions will be brought forward as a basis for a certain position to be advanced.
Thanks, Mr. Smith.
Okay. Can you, Mr. Smith, I read the report quite carefully, and I'm a bit perplexed at some of the performance standard changes that the rezoning is proposing. Maybe you can elaborate on them. I mean, if I understand correctly, the rear yard setback, and that would be the rear property line, is moving from 7.5 meters to 0.3 meters?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and that it's not for the entire sort of north facade, it's for the lower portion. I'll let Ms. Wing deal with this a little bit more thoroughly. She's much more intimate with the details, but what she's put on the screen right now is the overall site plan that shows where the various setbacks applied at the different levels.
And then she can tell us why she doesn't think that the putting it so close to the lot line, backing on, and she says singles is a good thing to do.
So in terms of the relief to the performance standards requested, one is to the rear yard setback, just shown on the back of the site here. So in terms of the setback, what's required by the zoning is 7.5 meters, and the setback as proposed is 0.3 meters. If you look at the site plan, it does step back 7.5 meters above the mezzanine floor, but in terms of other relief that's being requested, when a development development's within a traditional Main Street zone and abuts a residential zone, there is a 45-degree angular plane that developments are to meet. In this case, the proposal is requesting relief from this requirement. So that requirement would be 7.5 meters from the rear lot line, going up 15 meters, and then the building could not be within the 45-degree angular planes. And this requirement is to help transition developments when they're next to residential areas. In terms of other relief being sought, specific to the Wellington Street West zoning. In terms of the character, it's characterized as 2 to 3 stories. So maintaining that 2 to 3 story base was put in the zoning by requesting a front yard setback above the 3rd stories, or 12 meters. I just have the list here. So rear yard. And as well, there are other setback requirements when you're next to a residential zone, one being a landscaped area from a residential zone. So the request is to go from 3 meters to 0.3 meters, as well as a separation distance from an outdoor patio space from 30 meters to 2 meters. And that, again, speaks to the site abutting an R1 zone for that requirement. As you can see the building footprint of the houses along Garrison Street. It's quite close to the property line, so in terms of the building being brought forward, it's really bringing that building mass closer to a residential area.
So if I'm standing next to one of those houses, how high does that building rise 0.3 meters off the property line?
I believe it goes, the podium, in terms of the base, the first floor plus the mezzanine is 6.2 meters, but they did put in a step back. I think it goes to 4 meters, and then there's a landscape strip here, and then this line is 6.2 meters.
So where does that landscape strip fit at grade, or is that?
It's on top of the mezzanine floor at 4 meters.
So it's a.
So this line is
a wall rises 4 meters, then the mezzanine strip.
And then to 6.2 meters.
There's a landscape strip on the roof portion of the 4-meter high portion of the mezzanine. So where you see those round circles, that's actually the roof of the mezzanine portion that's at, or of that podium that's 4 meters above grade, and then you step back and then it rises up another couple of meters.
4 meters of wall, then a step back and a landscape strip 0.3 meters off the property line.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And I will add there are grade variations in this area. So the Wellington Street West is on a higher grade and the residential properties are on a lower grade. So although it's 4 meters from a perception point of view, it could appear higher as it's on a higher level.
So which is on the higher level? The
proposed building.
The building is higher than
the residential houses.
So actually it looks, so if I'm standing back there, it's going to, the wall that I'm facing is going to look higher.
Yes.
Okay. And are those the only changes off of the performance standards?
Yes, it's for heights and setbacks. So in terms of the front yard setback, they're in conformance. In terms of the interior lot lines, they're in conformance. It's really regarding the separation distances from a residential area and then the front yard setback in relation to the Wellington Street West zoning on the 3rd story.
Okay. And all of these zonings exist and all of the zonings that exist today are consistent with the CDP, except for the ability to rise in height from 6 to 9.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
So we would expect in a development that conforms to our CDP to be 7.5 meters off the property line, respecting the 45-degree angular plane, and at that point they could go to 9 stories.
That's correct. There were some unique situations that required some adjustments. Those could get looked at, but that's correct. I mean, the standards were set as a general standard across the Wellington Strip, and that's the expectation is that want to try to direct development to work within those parameters. If there's sort of challenges that come to bear, which we see from time to time based on unique site circumstances, then we can consider that. But it was for up to 9 stories, that's right.
So, Ms. C, why does the planning rationale that's been presented to support this application, why does it say that those adjustments are appropriate in this location?
In terms of the rear yard setback, it really has to do with the ground floor and the internal layout. So they have made the driveway, the loading areas internal to the site, and that's why to the back the building is enclosed for those uses. In terms of the other setbacks, I assume it's to meet a certain gross floor area number. In terms of the CDP and the secondary plan, it does envision this site to be a 9- and 6-story building, therefore proposing the 12-story plus a mezzanine floor. And in terms of the zoning bylaw, mezzanine floor is considered a story. So in essence, it's a 13-story building, a high-rise building. It does spread that mass across both sites.
Okay. Any further questions before we get to delegations? Councillor Hobbs?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just in terms of the front yard setback, I just want to confirm that that was something you asked them to do and they changed because the front yard setback would be in line with the neighboring properties.
In terms of the front yard setback requirement, there's a maximum of 3 meters. The variation of the site plan, it was originally 1.8 meters, and in the latest version it's now 1 meter, and that is to provide a wider sidewalk. So that was something that was submitted with the application, and provide a wider front yard setback.
And something that you asked them to change or adhere to, or because one of the 30 items that I think that were mentioned in your report back to the applicant was in regards to that front yard setback. So I just really want to confirm, is it adhering to what you asked them to do, or is it not?
I would say it's in keeping with the CDP.
But is it adhering to what you asked them to do and on this particular site?
It was submitted this way, and we did not have concerns with the front yard setback.
So what they originally submitted was fine?
In terms of the front yard setback, yes.
In terms of the front yard setback. So that was never changed then through this process?
I would say that was never a significant issue on this proposal, the front yard setback.
I guess I'm just confused because I thought that there was something to do with the front yard setback that we asked them to change.
I believe it's likely the upper story setback. We did have concerns.
Not at the ground?
Yeah, so it wasn't the ground floor was the issue, it was the upper
Thank you for clarifying that. The other thing is the rear yard setback. We're talking a lot here about the neighbors, and I think many of them are here today, and a lot of the arrangements made on the rear yard setbacks were in keeping with what those residents were asking. And so in terms of what could be built here, if somebody just wanted to take out a permit and build the 6 stories, how close would that building be to the properties behind, and could it rise up exactly 6 stories from that point?
In terms of the existing zoning, the requirement would be 7.5 meters, so it would be this line right here. And then above the 4th floor, they would be required to meet the 45-degree angular plane, so that would provide story step backs from the back of the building.
And that's even at a 6-story, they would still at the 4th be requested to step back?
Above 15 meters, yes.
Okay, so the step back here, where there's the 7.5, so the portion that's to the north of that is 4 stories now?
Yes, so this is the mezzanine floor, the 4th story, and then there's an additional step back at the 10th story.
And do you have any comment about how that sort of impacts the immediate needs versus the setback that would be required under if you were just building a 6-story, having the setback be at that level? How is this really going to differ for those neighbors?
When looking at the existing zoning to the zoning proposed, it's 6 stories across both sites. And now, in terms of the proposed zoning, it's 12 stories across both sites. So before it'd be a 20-meter building, but it's now a 44.5-meter building mass across both properties.
Yeah, but what I'm asking about is specifically the setbacks that are here that are in the 7.5 zone from the neighbors.
Yep.
In terms of what could be built at 6 stories, right, 7.5 meters back, and what is being proposed here, what's the difference in impact? Because 6 stories or 9 stories or 12 stories, these neighbors are in shadow. So that's irrelevant there, but it's this 45-degree plane, how is that affected by this and with the setbacks not adhering in the rear?
I would say there's 2 parts to that. In terms of the additional 6 stories from the proposed amendment, you're going to have an increased impact on the interface of the building to the residential area, so in terms of shadows, overall mass, and I know we're speaking to the rear yard setback, but also maintaining the traditional Main Street character of Wellington Street West. Originally, the CDP contemplates a building transition from 9 to 6 stories, so now that you have, in essence, a 13-story building across.
Yeah, I understand that, but it's just really the rear yard setback I'm wondering about, and I know and I appreciate you talked about massing along Wellington when we met back in December, but I guess I'm concerned in trying to get the relation between what could be built here by permit, which, in previous applications that come forward and neighbors didn't really like, and what is being proposed here in terms of setback, which neighbors abutting it do like. So how is that issue of the 45 degrees or how is that different in impacting those neighbors? Because, if you have a 6-story building right directly to the north of you, you are in shadow. And so if you have a 4-story building right there, you're in shadow. So I'm just wondering how the differentiation between the angular plane or the differences between what could be built and what's being applied for in terms of the rear setback only.
In this case, with the rear yard setback going near the property line, you lose the open space, you lose building separation. It physically brings the building next to that residential area. So yes, it's next to the abutting properties, but it's also looking at the residential area as well. So it's bringing a larger building closer to the residential area. In terms of that 7.5 meter setback, it's now covered by a building. It's not open space as a rear yard setback it's typically used for. So I would say that's the main difference. And in terms of requesting for the setbacks or relief from the setbacks, you're losing that ability to transition the height of this tall building.
And so how much space is there between the lot line here and where the building starts? What's the space in meters?
For the proposed development? Or?
Yeah, between what the proposed development is and where the lot line is. Is there any space? Is it built right on the lot line? Or
it's 0.3 meters, so it's 0.3? 0.3 meters, yes.
So what's the angular plane when you rise above 15 meters? What does that brings the building, the front, the rising part out further away from the residential?
The upper stories of the building to transition away so there's less impact from from the ground view in terms of seeing those extra levels.
So right now, I see it rise up. It sets back a little bit, and the difference between that and the existing zoning is it starts 7.5 meters back from the lot line.
That is correct.
And it rises up, and then the 45-degree angular plane means that there's a further
setbacks above the 4th story.
Above the 4th story.
Yes.
And that setback, do we know what that setback is?
Mr. Chairman, I think without having done the calculations, just looking at the depth of the property, I would suspect that with the application of the 45-degree height plane and where that would intersect with the property line on Richmond Road, or Wellington Street rather, you would not even be able to get a 12-story building of any form within that envelope that's defined by the 15 meters and the 45-degree. So what this proposal is doing is introducing a mass that was not contemplated through the setbacks and with a 45-degree angular plane that continues to rise up in very close proximity and becomes a very large element that is present and highly visible from the community to the north, which wouldn't otherwise be the case.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thanks very much. And I appreciate that there's a lot of different setbacks on the back here, and maybe all the calculations have not been done for the 45-degree angle. Is that what I'm hearing, that we were only looking at where are we looking at for the 45-degree angle?
In terms of the zoning bylaw amendment request, the applicant was seeking relief from this performance standard. So in terms of our evaluation and this performance standard in a traditional Main Street zone, that is one of the factors in reviewing this proposal.
So we have done measurements for, with this 7.5, like we were talking before about the 45-degree angle happening, that was why after 4 stories you would set back. Although this is closer after 4 stories, it is being set back quite significantly, that 7.5. So I would be interested in knowing exactly about the 45-degree angles in the back. But I also do want to mention that the neighbors didn't particularly want the setback. They didn't want the open green space, and they'll be here today talking, but they wanted the privacy, and they felt that the wall would provide them with the privacy. So how is the strip of unusable green space that would have been created here, how is that a better planning rationale than the request of the neighbors to have a privacy wall in their backyards?
In terms of when this proposal was received, we reviewed the whole proposed development on its own merits. So it wasn't looking individually at each performance standard. It was looking at the total request of the zoning. So I would say the 2 main parts of the request was to the height and to the setbacks. In terms of looking only at that 7.5 meter separation distance, that was part of our review, but not the only concern that we had on the project.
So this the setback that is that first portion that is taking up the 7.5, that area to the north, is that 1 story?
It's the ground floor plus the mezzanine floor, so it's 6.2 meters tall.
Okay. So it's not 4 stories, it's not 6 stories right in this neighbor's backyard. It is basically
2 stories.
2 stories technically, but sort of 1 story.
In terms of the height, 6.2
because we count a mezzanine.
meters.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. So in reality, we're exchanging that with in that 7.5 area, and from what I understand, the neighbors can confirm this, that was something that they had requested with the applicant to protect their properties. And so I'm wondering in what you read from the neighbors, how you sort of have dealt with that question of their protection of their property with this sort of 1-story addition in the back.
Sure. In terms of the comments that we received from the public, and there were some that were received.
Specifically sort of the abutting neighbors I'm concerned about, because, this is them. It's not the rest of the community at this point. Height aside, because, everybody has a comment on the height, but for the abutting neighbors, this is in the backyard.
And I guess I would say that's related to the internal floor layout. So they could still provide an internal driveway, have the loading areas internal to the building, but it does not need to go back to the rear lot line. So they could still achieve that function, but in this proposal, they are maximizing their lot coverage, and it's located to the back of the site.
But to have 7.5 there in a 1-story, or with the 1-story with the mezzanine, as you would have proposed, a better thing to do here from your perspective would have been to make that just empty green space, a green space area.
I think in terms of reviewing this proposal, we were looking at all the aspects and the issues, and one of the issues was the 7.5 meters. If there's another proposal that came in with something different, then we'd be evaluating it on its own merit. So it's so difficult to say, with this proposal being approved, if there is a 7.5 meter grass strip, but in terms of the rationale provided for decreasing that rear yard setback, one of the reasons was having that internal driveway, which necessarily does not need to be located at that location.
Yeah, and the internal driveway was something important to the neighbors as well. So I guess in this, I just want to make clear we're talking a lot about impact on neighbors here, and why we made planning decisions, and those planning decisions are against what the neighbors have asked for. So just as we're talking about neighbors, let's please consider what the neighbors have said and not use it as a rationale for any of this. And I'm not saying you're doing that, but I think that's kind of what I've been hearing around the table. Thanks.
Okay. Further questions for staff? Let's see if we can go to delegations and get at least half an hour's worth of delegations through, and at 12:30 we'll break for lunch for half an hour. So first on our speaker list is John Tompkins. Mr. Tompkins, are you here?
Morning. Public speaking is not my forte. I'm a little nervous here, so...
Don't be nervous. You have 5 minutes to say pretty much what's on your mind. So.
Okay. I live at 54 Garrison Street, directly behind. My garage is at the top left there. I purchased my property in 1999, built a house on the property, and I was fully aware that eventually there would be development directly behind me. Nothing happened for a few years, but over the past 4 or 5 years, there have been a number of developers, 5 or 6 I believe, who have come up with various proposals for the property. I had 6 or 7 major concerns, and none of the previous proposals addressed any of those concerns. Those developers approached us. They told us what they were going to do. They didn't ask us what we wanted. And some of the impact on our street and on the neighborhood was huge. For instance, I'm right in the corner of Garrison and Rockhurst. They were going to bring all of their traffic down Garrison, down Rockhurst, and have all the entry to the building. Residents, commercial, garbage trucks was coming right through our residential neighbors and in the back. There were huge privacy concerns. There were noise concerns. I don't want the strip of land between the building. I want the wall because there currently is a strip of land. That's where my house has been vandalized from. That's where the skunks and the raccoons lived. It's got no redeeming value. When the Mizrahi group approached us, they asked us before they told us. We had a meeting at a neighbor's home. He said, what would you folks, he said, I'd like to develop the property, what would you folks like to see? We expected what all of the other developers had done, but that's not what we heard. We started listing our concerns. He said, well, traffic, for instance. He said, I will bring everything in on Wellington. It won't come through your neighborhood. No rear amenity areas. In other words, no barbecues and hot tubs and units staring down into our backyard. Mechanical, noise, outdoor, air conditioning units, that sort of stuff. He said everything will be internal to the building. So of the 6 or 7 major concerns which I had, he addressed all of them except one, and that was the height. In terms of dealing with the height, I'm shadowed at 6 stories in the wintertime. I'm shadowed at 9, I will be shadowed at 12. So I'm willing personally to let that one go because they have met our other requirements. I hear about your CDP and it's a blanket statement and this is the definitive height. Sites are different. It's all open to the west of this site. There's not just the huge intersection area, there's also the NCC land, then there's the city land. To my mind, that open space absorbs some of the additional height that they're requesting. The market has spoken. I know you're politicians, but the people that actually develop and put their money into the city are private enterprise, private developers. And there's been 5 of them that have said the economies of scale simply don't work. Well, if 5 developers have said it won't work, I guess it won't work under the current setup. I love the looks of the building that's proposed, and I see what you've allowed just to the west. I've lived there for 14 years. I'm retired. I walk that strip every day. That Ashcroft stuff to the west is absolutely atrocious. You call that a main street, a traditional main street? It's absolutely atrocious. There's no redeeming qualities to those buildings whatsoever. It's like walking through a canyon. I've pretty much stated most of the things. I'm in support of the proposal. I like the building. I think most of the neighborhood is in support of the proposal. That's pretty much what I have to say. Incidentally, at the last major meeting at the
I just want to stop you there. We don't allow clapping because we don't allow booing. And, you know, if you were up here saying an alternative and people were booing in the background, I wouldn't allow that. So we'd ask everyone not to clap and not to boo, because that's not the way we operate here. So.
Incidentally, I think I may still have a couple of seconds left on my phone.
Go ahead. Yeah, I'll give you lots of time.
The last major community meeting at the GCTC with the developer, there was lots of clapping at that meeting, and I've read in the paper that's very unusual for at a development meeting.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you very much for is there questions for Mr. Tompkins? No? Thank you very much. John Newcomb. Mr. Newcomb, if you'd like to come up.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is John Newcomb, and I'm the owner of the property situated on the southeast corner of Island Park Drive and Wellington Street West, located directly across from that of the applicant. As such, I will be significantly affected by the proposed development. I wish to state my full and unreserved endorsement of the development proposal submitted by Mizrahi Developments, and urge the committee to approve the request for a building of 12 stories in height. Unlike other neighbors, I look directly out onto the subject property on a daily basis. It can only be described as a local example of urban blight. An abandoned building complete with an array of boarded-up windows on a property that is in a continual state of decline. This site, a designated gateway to the Wellington West business corridor, has been neglected for far too long. History shows us that strict adherence to the CDP will not encourage the construction of an iconic building at this address. This is confirmed by the fact that at least 5 local developers, including highly respected architect Barry Hoban, abandoned their plans for this site as they were deemed to be economically unfeasible under current zoning constraints. The applicant has stated that the cost of environmental remediation of this property is a significant justification for requesting an increase in building height. I wish to comment, as I have personal experience on this topic. My property, which covers approximately only 1/2 of the area of the proposed development, received a full environmental remediation in 1994, and the costs incurred at that time exceeded $1.5 million. It has been suggested by Chairman Hume that a developer should factor in such environmental cleanup costs when negotiating the purchase price of a property. Obviously, market forces have already ensured that this has happened at 1451 Wellington Street, as this property sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars below the proposed cost of site remediation. Carrying this theory to illogical extremes would suggest that the seller should have actually paid Mizrahi $1 million to take the real estate off his hands. In conclusion, it is my opinion that if developers are not allowed certain latitudes in the revitalization of these derelict, contaminated properties, there will never be an economic incentive to elevate these sites to their full potential. Instead, they will permanently succumb to undesirable uses and remain as visual eyesores. Or worse yet, be abandoned by absentee owners and become magnets for crime and other nefarious activities. Consistent with Mayor Watson's mandate to eradicate such properties from our neighborhoods, the gateway to Wellington West deserves a building of aesthetic beauty and visual impact, one that will make an economic contribution to the community. We have endured the current example of urban blight on this corner for far too long, and positive change will only begin if you approve the relief
requested. Good, thank you very much. Are there questions for Mr. Newcomb? No. Mr. Newcomb, thank you very much. Roland Dorsey. Mr. Dorsey, if you'd like to come up.
Looking at my watch, I guess it's safe to say good afternoon instead of good morning. My name is Roland Dorsey. I'm a 37-year resident of Island Park Drive and a member of the Island Park Community Association. Like many in Kitchissippi Ward, I have fought the good fight against high-rise development along the main street. To paraphrase a line from Casablanca, one of my favorite movies of all time, I'm shocked, I tell you, to hear that there's support for this kind of thing going on. So I'm here today to speak in support of the Mizrahi application. In fact, I would say I'm here to speak in enthusiastic support for that application. The Wellington site is a very important location within the Kitchissippi Ward. There's Wellington Village on one side of it, Westboro on the other, and Island Park Drive in the middle. It's a key gateway for all three adjacent communities. It has, as you've already heard, remained greatly underdeveloped for the nearly 4 decades that I have lived in the area. It is a pedestrian and a cycling dead zone in the heart of the community. It would be a lost opportunity if this site remains as it is for yet another 37 years or more. Today, the 2 parcels of land under consideration are little more than a large asphalted parking lot. One houses a now empty former car wash, the other a wonderful family-owned and family-run Italian restaurant, one that my waistline is testimony to the fact that it's one of the best in the city in my view, and it would be incorporated as an anchor tenant in the proposed Mizrahi development. The car wash site is exactly what sound planning policy says should be discouraged on city main streets. Replacing the unsightly car wash in Bella's Bistro with an iconic, well-designed, high-build quality building that provides an opportunity for Bella to remain on site and expand with the addition of a gelateria and an outdoor cafe would be a wonderful improvement to what is there now. So too would be the transformation of a small city-owned mound of grass and trees that in its current state is seldom used into an attractive parkette with a water feature, a public sculpture, some benches, and a cycle path to it. So too would be the remediation of a highly contaminated site. And then there's about $900,000 a year in property taxes that no doubt the city could put to good use. Those are all good and compelling reasons why this development proposal should be allowed to go ahead. There's that, and then there's the unprecedented degree of extensive public consultation the developer has undertaken and his extraordinary responsiveness in addressing community concerns. Despite the proposed development's many obvious benefits that normally should make council approval a no-brainer, there is one drawback that makes this a more difficult decision than it should be. The developer is seeking more floors than the 2011 Wellington Village Community Design Plan allows for. As I understand it, the developer cannot and will not go ahead unless he gets an okay to construct a 12-story building to make the project economically viable. Given the history of this site, I feel there is no reason to doubt him. In recent years, as I understand it, 5 or more developers have seriously looked at developing this location. All have walked away because each and every one of them found the cost to be prohibitive. So with that history, my concern is that this could very well be the last chance to see the needed revitalization of this site for a very, very long time. Is the Mizrahi proposal a perfect one? No, but it comes close. And because it comes so close, I suggest we should be careful not to let the idealized but likely unrealizable best be the enemy of an imminently realizable good. In a perfect world, we would all strongly prefer that the height limits set out in CDPs should be respected. Rarely, however, is reality as perfect as we would like it. The Wellington Community Association says as much in terms of support for CDPs in its policy statement attached to the planning staff report. The adjacent Island Park Drive Community Association have the same view. So am I. So too I expect our councillors here today, as we all should. Despite that, the immediate neighbours on Garrison Street, who arguably would be the most affected by the development, are, I am told, unanimous in their support for the Mizrahi proposal. The Island Park Community Association also supports the Mizrahi application, this notwithstanding that it too believes that CDPs should be adhered to. So too does the local BIA. Even the Wellington Village Community Association, within whose boundary the Mizrahi site is located, has stated in its position letter that it will not oppose the Mizrahi proposal, even though it does not conform to its own CDP. Let's face it, when it comes to fighting high-rise intensification above and beyond what is in a CDP, Kitchissippi Ward residents are a tough crowd, probably as tough as anywhere in the city. So, when you get the kind of community responses we've seen in this case, something pretty extraordinary is taking place, something worth paying careful attention to. As you well know, there have been quite a few cases where communities have fought unsuccessfully against height increases. Here, ironically, we find ourselves in the relatively rare and strange situation where, notwithstanding the CDP limits, there's broad community acceptance for going higher. I suggest to you that public submissions from the immediate neighbours and from the area community associations are a more current expression of community preferences than is what is written in the 2011 CDP. In the circumstances, committee approval of the Mizrahi project would be consistent with and fully respectful of the preponderance of current community preferences. In closing, I would like to speak to what I perceive to be an unfortunate undertone that I've seen in some of the media coverage and on public blogs about the Mizrahi proposal, namely that it is from a Toronto-based developer, as though that were a bad thing. Frankly, I have no idea why this has become an issue for some, but I'd like to think that as a city and as a community, we are better than that. I'm not aware of similar aspersions, for example, in Toronto when Minto, an Ottawa-based developer, built a luxury high-rise building in Yorkville. There were no similar aspersions when a Montreal-based developer considered building a Class A office building on what is now the Mizrahi site. If we want our city to grow and thrive in the way that I'm sure we would all like, we need to encourage the best entrepreneurs to bring their talents here, no matter where in Canada they come from. For these reasons and more, I encourage the committee to approve the Mizrahi proposal. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Other questions for Mr. Dorsey? Councillor Blois.
Sir, I guess to quote from one of my favorite movies, I'm shocked too. I'm really shocked. I just want to understand, I see a pattern, I look at it, there's a long list of presenters here, and the pattern I see developing is, one of consensus, and I think you indicated you attended the community meetings out there, and
in fact, I did attend the Mizrahi public consultation sessions, yes,
right.
If that's what you're
so,
referring to.
Is the consensus, what I see here, and I look at the BIA letter, I see it a community association letter, one of them endorses, the other one sort of says, well, even if we don't support, we don't oppose. Is the consensus, in your opinion, that there is support in the community for this? Because that's what I seem to be seeing building on the list here and from the feedback we're getting.
I think that is my sense. I assume that there are some who are opposed, notwithstanding, but my sense is that the preponderance, and large preponderance of those who live in the community are strongly supportive of this proposal. Certainly I know I am.
So, I mean, you heard...
As are my neighbors, if I may.
Right. You heard some of that preliminary banter that went around about we have rules and how do we defend our rules, etc. Is this a capitulation because of fear of the unknown, though, or do you believe that this is a product that is acceptable, that is positive, that has a solid influence in the community, as opposed to, we're worried about what else could happen?
Yeah, well, certainly for me, it's not fear of the unknown. I consider this a wow development.
Okay.
Yes, we would all like the height to be lower for good and obvious reasons, but when I weigh the balance of benefits in my mind, the pros and the cons, it's no contest as far as I'm concerned. There are enormous benefits to the community from having this site developed. As the previous speaker has said, the site as it currently stands is becoming derelict, and it's been like that for decades. And the question is, given a choice between something that is mighty fine, in my view, not necessarily perfect because of that one consideration, and the status quo, I'll gladly choose what is being proposed.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Jody Spingle, if you'd like to come up.
Hello, Mr. Chair, committee. I may not live in an adjacent property directly behind where the project is going on.
You need to pull your microphone a little closer.
Sorry, I'm a little nervous. As I was saying, I may not live directly behind where the property is going to be developed, but I am in the neighborhood just down on Spencer Street, about 4 blocks away, and I shop frequently in this neighborhood. My grocery store is right beside it. A number of the shops that we walk to, my friends come to visit me in my place because I'm close to everything, so we walk down the streets on a regular basis. We drive down them on a regular basis, and in the 10-plus years I've lived in the West Row, Wellington area, I've seen a number of condo developers erect these buildings all throughout the neighborhood, and slowly you can see the entire area coming together. They're really bringing up the quality of the neighborhood. I'm strongly urging the committee to allow the amendment to go through. There's no developer that we've seen in our area that has ever come across and addressed the issues of the community like the Mizrahi company has. They've taken the time to speak to all of the community members that they can have a chance to meet with and really address what it is that they're looking for. And the number of the people who were speaking before me have said everything I have written down on this piece of paper. I'm going to faint. If you look at the way this contractor is conducting business, I think that this should proceed in the sense that we need to look at amending this and also future amending the way that the business is decided in the neighborhood, in the sense that this company is setting a precedent in how business should be conducted. So any future developers that come in should need to follow the same types of processes and conduct themselves the way that the Mizrahi company has, because I think it really helps with involving the community and making sure that everybody has a say. So one thing that really touched me with what they've done with the Bella's restaurant, because they could have come in and just purchased that property and just said, thank you very much. It's nice doing business with you, but they took it one step further and heard this, from what I understand, I don't know the exact details, but heard the story of the family that's been there for 3 generations and didn't want to see them leave that area that they've had for a very long time. So gave them first right to move into the building and are helping them design their fantastic, beautiful new restaurant. So they really listen to what we want and what the people want in the neighborhood. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Harder has a question for you.
Thank you very much. In the last, about 2 weeks ago, I had my first visit to Bella, and I didn't realize that it was right. I saw the Mizrahi sign, and I thought, wow. Usually we all try to get out and see, where the applicant is building, because we don't represent the entire city, and we may not have the familiarity. So I know exactly that, and it was surprising to me that the the owner was so enthusiastic about his excitement in this project. But my question for you is, really, I mean, we have so many applications coming from Councillor Hobbs' area, and I can honestly say that this is the first time that we have had such a, for the most part, positive comments from the people that live there and have lived there for a long time. So I have to ask you, would you sum it up by saying, is it really, is the difference really about the fact that they came and they built their proposal around what the community talked to them about?
Absolutely.
And so that's, and that, in a nutshell, that was the difference, and that's why, you know, we're going to hear, I'm sure, a lot of other people that are going to be from another opinion, but for those of you that have spoken thus far.
There was a gentleman I was speaking with earlier who unfortunately had to leave.
Can you speak a little bit louder, please?
Sorry. There was a gentleman I was speaking with earlier who was at the public hearing we had in December as well. Him and his wife lived directly in behind, and they were opposed, initially opposed. And he wanted to come and speak today, but he couldn't. And he said, I'm still somewhat opposed in the sense that I'll lose my view, but I really respect this developer, and I really want them to be doing more things in our neighborhood. So they've altered their decision, and it's the buzz on the street, like people I've spoke to all up and down my street, that it's a very small community, so people will stop and talk to everybody, and it's created quite the stir. And they've started something big here. I think that their input on any projects going forward would be beneficial to anything in the neighborhood, and it's going to be fantastic.
Well, just one last question then. Staff have done a lot of work on this, and really, you have a very recent community design plan that I'm sure many of the people that are going to speak today were involved with, and, you know, stuck their heels in and said, we're not having any height higher than this. What in your mind is I guess the question would be, does design and community interests negate that 9-story and allow you to accept the extra 3? Is that what it is too?
The neighborhood has been evolving a lot over the last 10 years. And I believe, Mr. Chair, as you had said before, you know, if you start saying allow 12 stories to come in here, when you zoned it for 9, and you start putting all these rules into place, and then eventually they become redundant because nobody will believe you. But if you look at the street as a whole, when you're driving down Wellington Street into Richmond, all the way down to, I think it's Roosevelt, especially down by Roosevelt, there's a newer condo building that was put up there, and it's a little bit higher. But look how it tied in that end of the community and all the beautiful little coffee shops, and all of that is slowly blending upwards to Kirkwood, where it's flowing. And then there used to be patches of open spaces and old rundown places, and now the whole community is tying in together. And this building, the design, the look of it, where it's located, it's the perfect spot. That's a beautiful neighborhood. It is the heart of the neighborhood, and having that specific type of structure there and something that the community has chosen, essentially, is very important.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. Willie Albert. Mr. Albert here? No. Jamie Certes? They here? Didn't I call Eddie Cook? Sorry, I'll call Eddie Cook.
Oops. Hello. Okay. Most of my sentiments have been expressed already. I just want to make 2 comments. One was to Councillor Harder, the question you had just asked of the previous person. I think the overwhelming support is a combination the support is a result of a combination of the consultation with the neighbors and also the fact that the proposed building is such a beautiful and unique building that is not yet seen in this neighborhood. And the neighborhood, I mean, Island Park Drive is so beautiful with the embassies and everything. I just think the building suits the space, that gateway space, so well. The other comment I wanted to make was the design, the Mizrahi design for the internal amenities to satisfy the neighbors, things like the HVAC and the internal garbage. I just thought maybe that those amenities would take such a large space within the building that might be a reason to allow the additional height. Just a thought. But I'm in support of the project. I think it's a beautiful building. I think it would enhance the neighborhood.
So if you move further down the street where there are other buildings that proponents have looked at, let's say in the 6-story range, and have said, listen, I can't make that go at 6 stories, and they come in and do the same thing, are you saying that it's okay to increase height in those areas as long as they follow the same model?
I think that each project should be looked at individually.
Okay, so you're not, so what you're really saying is the 6-story height limit that the certainty that we were asked to bring 24 months ago really isn't relevant to you. And I'm not trying to put you in a hard spot, because you see, what's really difficult for us is that for 5 years before this application, we were told that people didn't like spot rezonings. Don't spot rezone. Stop spot rezoning our properties. And so we took a very direct position to infuse our planning documents with certainty, and you'll hear the mayor and I talk about certainty, something that you can rely on, that when you buy a property, you know that's 9, you know that's 6, and under very defined circumstances, that's going to change. And what we're hearing now is, that's not so important anymore. And the consequence of that is broader than this property, and it will affect other properties in the West Wellington area. And so we have to get a really good sense, and this is why this is very interesting, because we've never heard this before, that it's okay if the community likes it and you consult in advance. 6 not important, 9 and 12. And I'm not trying to say that it's the consequences after this that I'm trying to get a sense from you are. It takes us down a different path.
Yeah, I understand the importance of the CDP. I just think this is a special site, a gateway site, and maybe it should be looked at individually. And because of the overwhelming support, we need to look at it as a separate project.
Okay. That's fair enough.
Thank you. Oh.
Great. Councilor Hobbs?
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Ms. Certes, for coming today. Just in line with that, if for other developments that are happening along in our area, do you feel a similar process as this developer went through in terms of consultation and working with the community to, and as Mr. Dorsey said, to find the current expression of the community preference? Do you think it's a good model to do and something that we should be paying attention to the community?
The community certainly responded well to it. It makes sense to me.
Okay.
That's all I can say about that.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks.
Is that all?
Are there any further questions for No. Thank you very much for your presentation. Eddie Cook. Is Mr. Cook here? Yeah. Mr. Cook, if you'd like to come up.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, honorable committee members. My name's Eddie Cook. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. It's certainly the first time that I'm sitting in front of a committee with my concerns and my interests. And first of all, I just want to mention the way I became involved in all of this is I do not know Mr. Mizrahi. I've never spoken to him. However, I have a daughter that lives in Toronto, and I saw a Mizrahi development. And the irony that I'm hearing today is Mizrahi's building, Mr. Mizrahi Development's building here on Wellington seems to be the icon or the tall building of the street, and his development in Toronto on Avenue Road is the low end of the street in the sense of not a high-rise, not a 30-story, not a 40-story, 50 or 80-story building. So it was with some interest that when I saw his development in Toronto, and I saw how it was being built and the very unique design that I had seen when I saw his sign up here on Wellington, and that there was going to be a gathering, I think it took place last spring, that I wanted to go and hear about it. First of all, to support the sentiments of the other people here who are definitely living in the neighborhood and certainly more impacted than I am, his manner of speaking to everyone and addressing every single person at the meeting, from people who would be walking by the building with the baby carriage, and how would they have their safety taken care of because Ashcroft was building down the road and women were having to go on the street with their baby carriages. He said that he's got a system. He is ISO 9001. There are certain standards that he has to meet to retain that ISO, and that as to what I had seen in Toronto, everything is cleaned up during the day, and at the end of the day, nothing is left out on the street. People do not have to go off the sidewalk. And so his mannerisms and his specifics as to his concern to people for every area was something that really attracted me. Definitely when I saw the design of the building, and I respect you for your height zoning. However, there is, and I don't want to bad name anybody, but if you take an Ashcroft building, which is at the southeast corner, just down the road, 9 stories high, straight up, and you take a look at the design of this building, and I'm sure all of us have been to weddings. If you take a look at a wedding cake design, you can sense that with this building. So when you have the building going up 4 stories or 6 stories, and then it becomes recessed, when you're walking by or you're driving down the street, the visual is not a 12-story building towering over you on the road, whether you're walking or driving. The visual is that it's really a 4-story building, or maybe 6 stories, wherever the recess takes place. The visual is that the building is that high, it's very much recessed, which every developer, and I'm not in the business, but every developer knows when you recess like that, you're losing space on that area, which affects every floor above the 4 or 6 stories, however the design has been presented to the planning committee. So I believe that visual and creative imagination like this in this wedding cake design personally takes a lot more importance than just the height restriction. And to answer a question that you were asking earlier with regards to sentiments and do you do spot zoning and things like that, I think, well, maybe the market has changed in the last 4 or 5 years. I think the city's changed in 4 or 5 years. I think Mayor Watson is asking us and encouraging us to intensify our city. Councillor Chiarelli was just talking about that earlier, how intensification is more important. I think there's a lot of that sentiment here as well. We want to have a lot of things flowing in this city where the city doesn't just continue to spread out. When I keep hearing about neighbors, now somebody was building a building next to my home, and I was coming in to say I'm okay with it. That says a lot. That says a lot to you, for you to have to say, well, maybe what was there 4 or 5 years ago as a general plan and idea, which is good to have. However, this has made me a new way to think. And I think that the precedents that this builder has set, and you've heard it echoed before I've stepped in now, I think the precedents you've heard these people say that they like to be heard, they like to be asked, they like to be responded to, well, maybe it's going to create more work for councillor and other areas, but maybe it's the way to go now. Maybe we want to be more unique. Maybe it's like when we gave to charities before, we gave to an umbrella charity, and today we have our specific notions and our sensitivities where we want to donate our money to charities too, because certain things have a calling for us. So I appeal to you to sort of say, and I thank Mr. Mizrahi, because again, when he's the short building, so to speak, in a city where it's all super high rises, and here we are, we're talking about 3 extra stories, and ladies and gentlemen and council, let's face it, we haven't had Minto come in, we haven't had Urbandale come in, we haven't had Richcraft come in, we haven't had Claridge come in, we haven't had independent developers come in. Everybody's walked away from it. Personally, I'm not sure why he took it on, but the fact that he took it on and that he's here, I think is a welcome door for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Cook? No? Questions to staff? Thank you, Mr. Cook, for your presentation.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just in regards to, we've been talking about spot rezonings and official plan amendments and how we didn't want to do spot rezonings anymore. How many, what our process is here is official plan amendments. This does require an official plan amendment to go from 6 to 9, and that was what was in our plan. I guess I'm a bit confused. I think we've done 70 official plan amendments since this council has been struck. Are those what we consider spot rezonings? 70. Is that something we don't want to do anymore?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure how many actual official plan amendment applications we processed. I mean, spot rezoning, a rezoning on a particular property for a particular development, if it fits within the policy framework, then all you're dealing with is the rezoning application.
So what is a spot rezoning? What are we talking about?
It's the rezoning of a site-specific project or of a site for a site-specific project. That's really what it's all about.
Okay, so it's not, but in terms of doing one, we do them almost every planning committee. We'll have an official plan amendment.
Yes, the Planning Act clearly makes provisions that allows for property owners to submit rezoning applications, and once submitted, there's a requirement that they be considered by committee and council, and the key parameters in terms of determining from a staff perspective whether to recommend against or for is really how it fits within the policy framework the council has approved.
But we do consider an official plan amendment a legitimate way to change as per
That's also a means that are provided for in the Planning Act, that you can make application to amend an official plan if what you're asking to do doesn't fit within the policy regime or the policy framework. That's correct.
It's 12:45. We're a little late, so what I'm going to suggest we do is we break from 12:45 to 1:15, back in half an hour, and we'll reconvene, and our next speaker will be Ellen Wright. Okay, so we're suspended.